before falling into the arms of the PROTA. A small flashback is made at the moment when the blonde girl arrives with the organization to that meeting. She realizes that the PROTA is already there. By his attire, she realizes that he is completely different from the others who are standing next to him. Even by his attire that is completely alien to the real world, she tells herself that this event is her last chance because Lee Chang-suk had killed her older sister, who before dying had told her everything she had learned about the tutorial world. Although it was not information to die, in her mind everything she told him was recorded, including what she knew about the character Lee Hoi, the only survivor of the Hell difficulty. She remembers that he published a lot of information for the newcomers about the traps, but the community treated him as a liar. She is shocked to see him and stares at him while a guy is talking to the boss. The POTRA notices her gaze and she wonders if he will know that she is the informant, and without a plan she decides to approach him. But she is attacked by the boss. From the perspective of the PROTA, he thinks that for a long time things have become complicated. Every time he stands out from the others and tries to solve problems, every time he interferes, the problem becomes bigger and brings problems to the others. That's why he didn't want to be the leader of the team. Although in that world it seems that he will never be alone. He comes out of his thoughts when he sees the purple-haired man making a fuss while coughing from a blow he threw while blinking. The man asks him, exalted and dramatizing pain, why he hits people for no reason. He tells him that this is not right, and the people behind him support him, giving different comments as insults to his person. The PROTA spreads his wings and tells them that if they don't like it they should go after him. He tells them they are cowards, and everyone around him is amazed at how majestic his wings are. Quickly, the purple-haired man tells him that there is a misunderstanding and that he can explain everything. He tells him that it won't be a bad story for him and asks him to give him 5 minutes. The man approaches and tries to hit him, but the PROTA quickly flies and dodges the blow, but hits him, telling him to think that it might increase his resistance to pain. The man tells his people to get rid of him, and a boy with a sword runs out to attack him. The PROTA grabs the hand the boy is holding the sword with and avoids his attack. He quickly pushes him and hears how the boy complains in pain. The POTRA thinks that the defense function of the system works on him. He comes out of his thoughts and jumps on top of the boy when he sees that there is another one with an axe waiting for him. The POTRA thinks that the strength of that boy is comparable to a goblin instructor, but his posture is a disaster, so he comes out of his thoughts and kicks him in the chest. He thinks that the system mitigates the impact, but that doesn't mean that it goes away completely, so he continues to hit him. When the man falls completely to the ground, the POTRA thinks that the defense of the system is not perfect. It thinks that it connected perfectly to the arms, internal organs, and neck bones. The system nullifies all attacks using swords and mitigates the impact of the blows. Because of the limitations, joint strikes and choking skills cannot be used for a long time, but aiming for a critical and instantaneous hit will connect an effective hit. Even if there is a quick regeneration, they will suffer pain for a brief moment. The PROTA comes out of his thoughts and realizes that Kim Min-hyuk and other players are surrounding the confederation of what he thinks are bastards. He wonders if they will be trying to stop them from running away and realizes that they thought fast. The PROTA thinks that even if they all run away, he is confident that he will capture them all, and comes out of his thoughts when he hears how someone tells him that his moves are good, besides asking him what skills he uses. He is approached by a man with long black hair, and the POTRA wonders who he is, as he thought he was a gambler. He hears Kim Min-hyuk shouting that the man is Myung Jin Chan, and the POTRA thinks of the normal 6th floor. The man tells the POTRA that he is not the only one with skills, and from his sword starts to come out a violet light. The POTRA tells him that if he was done talking to come over and play some more. The POTRA sees Myung Jin Chan approaching and wonders what skill is coming out of his sword. He wonders if it is a buff, and says to himself that maybe it has an instant acceleration effect like the goblin instructor. From the POTRA's sword a blue light starts to come out and the battle begins. The man throws his spear at him, and the POTRA tells him that he cannot rely on his spear in such an impatient way like that. He hits him in the belly with his sword and the man shrieks from the pain. The POTRA thinks to himself that the knife attacks in that place really do hurt, and asks the man about how he can throw his weapon at a time like that. He wonders if that thing will be one of the 5 players in the top and turns to see the leader of the organization. He wonders if he should take care of those pig bastards already, and as he approaches he sees how the man pales. Suddenly the POTRA finds himself sleeping on the grass, thinking about how perfect that place is to take a nap. although it would have been completely perfect if it weren't for the complaints of those he calls pig bastards. An announcement appears telling him that his basic sword skill is now at level 7. He thinks about how the members of that group were extremely weak, and that allowed him to try many different combat patterns, although he didn't expect them to be weaker than a goblin. The POTRA thinks about how he has been developing his sword skills to evade his stronger opponents and attack passively, blocking with his shield and attacking their vital parts with speed. However, that time, as the guys were very weak, he was able to attack proactively using various methods and thinks about how he feels like hitting them some more. But it won't be his turn for a while, and he sees how the people around him hit the members of the Confederation. There is a flashback where the POTRA thinks that Kim Min-jaeuk made his move when he started to beat the members of the organization, rather than fighting together. That guy had used ropes to tie up the ones that the POTRA had knocked unconscious. He wondered when he had prepared the rope, for it seemed that he was planning to suppress them with his strength if anything happened. After all, the representative members of the Confederation were defeated. When PROTA was wondering what to do with them, the girl who had made eye contact with him appeared. Her name was Park Young-a. She had big blue eyes, and as one of the victims she was the one who leaked information to Kim Min-jaeuk. The girl had suggested to the POTRA a way to neutralize the representative Confederation. The most effective method was to send the challengers from the first and second floor, and be prepared for anything in case they sought revenge. Also not allowing them to do the same things to the new challengers, using the representative Confederation as punching bags for sparring practice as punishment, as well as using them for training, would help the victims overcome their fear, and unite to be strong enough to fight back. After sharing her thoughts, the girl gathered everyone in the field, told them about the evil deeds of the representative Confederation, and the pain that the victims endured. Through that action, she gained everyone's understanding, even those who were not involved with them, and appealed for support for the victims, condemning the Federation. With every word the girl said, she made all the victims unite. Following Kim Min-jaeuk, the challengers stepped back and supported the girl, because the confidence with which the girl spoke showed that it was better for her to solve the problem. Back to reality. In the field, the representative Confederation is helping the challengers as punching bags. Although there was criticism that it was morally wrong, things ended up like this because there was no better solution than the one proposed by the girl. With nothing else to do, the POTRA thinks about 13 hours left until the end of the event. He thinks about whether he should take a nap, but his thoughts are interrupted when the girl tells him that he had worked hard. She sits next to him and they both remain silent for a long while. Cutting the moment, the PROTA tells him that it was an awkward moment and she apologizes for that. She thanks him on behalf of her older sister and the other victims, to which he quickly wonders about that girl's older sister. She tells him that she has something to tell him. The beginning of Park Young-a's story contained everything. Even the event of that day, the story before the tutorial, inside the tutorial, and the death of her sister. Park Young-a asks PROTA to please lend her his strength. She tells him that she is aware that asking for something like that is shameless, but she would definitely pay that debt. PROTA tells her that paying him back is not a problem and asks her if she wants him to train her. She tells him no. What she wants is his strength at that moment, and the somewhat confused PROTA asks if she wants him to get her fruits like in the manhwas. He remembers something and hands her a gun. He tells her that that is a magic tool that causes an explosion within a short range. He explains to her that it can only fire 5 rounds, but it has no user condition and is quite powerful. She asks him about how much, and the PROTA tells her that he doesn't know for sure as he has never used it, so she should use it sparingly. She thanks him and tells him that from now on she will live for the good of others. She will fight to protect others, and this is how she will pay her debt. The PROTA tells her that he thinks she is paying the wrong person. As he sees her walking away, he asks her where she is going, and she tells him that she is going to prove it. On another side of the field, the leader of the Confederation is tied up and receiving blows from some people. In pain, he thinks that they will see what will happen, but he sees how Park Young-a approaches him with a gun and asks him what he has in his hand. The PROTA asks the girl what she intends to do, but does not receive an answer. The girl shoots in the air and the PROTA wonders what the girl is trying to do. He sees her take out a bottle of lubricant and smear some on her fingers. She grabs the man's face and sticks her fingers in his eyes, making him scream in pain, and in his right eye she buries her gun. The man screams in pain. Blood and foam come out of his eyes. She shoots him and the PROTA thinks of instant death. The girl, to prevent him from being cured by the system, blew his head off in an instant. She turns and starts walking. The PROTA gives him a disapproving look and she comments that that gun was quite useful. He thinks of her being crazy, and that it was surprising that there was someone crazier than him. Park Young-a reappeared after taking revenge against his sister's enemy without any emotion or purpose. He raised his hand and made a statement. Guarding the laws and public order of the Korean servant, a civilian militia was born. 2 days had passed since the unification. At first the fifth-floor raid was supposed to be summed up immediately, but the POTRA had put their plans aside to help the founding of the militia. PROTA tells how numerous victims joined and became its members. Some had promised to work with Park Young-a before the day of unification. Some were hostile against the girl's actions. But a large number of challengers found inspiration in the girl's Valentine and joined the militia. Kim Min-jaeuk and PROTA are having a conversation. Kim tells him that the girl looks like Joan of Arc, and PROTA tells him that she looks more like a demon covered in blood. The players who destroyed the Rep Guild, including Kim and POTRA, joined the militia, which established a number of rules and law and order required to ensure that the challengers have a minimum of safety and rights, which was not to protect the players or assailants, but the weak, the lower floor challengers, and for that purpose they worked on forming some foundational rules. The first rule decreed that assault was not allowed. The second rule decreed that rape was not allowed. The third rule decreed that robbery was not allowed. The fourth rule decreed that violating the freedom of others was not allowed. Some people objected, considering that breaking the rules would result in punishment, according to the internal rules of the civilian militia, but Park Young-a and supporters went ahead. The discussions ended. 3 members of the representative guild were executed and the other members were put on probation to be observed. But due to executions by firearms and all kinds of violence at its peak, the minds of the remaining members were completely destroyed. That gave the PROTA and his friends to understand that they should not worry about a rebellion. But a portion of the militia gave up on clearing the tutorial and were assigned to the second floor just in case anything happened. The PROTA and his friends realized that it was necessary to guide the newcomers and give them an explanation of the rules. Kim Min-jaeuk would prepare the newcomers who would come during the next session, distribute notices and manuals among the community, and that's how things finally ended in the early morning of the next day. In another part of the tutorial, the PROTA complains about some drops that fall on his hand. He thinks about the annoyance that it causes him and that this practical work did not fit him. The POTRA is in a kind of vault and reaches the end where he sees an iron door. He realizes that it is the boss room of the 5th floor. He thinks about what skill with the sword he has climbed. So it was time to say goodbye to that floor. Although he was worried, he was confident in his abilities and had faith that he would do well. He opens the door and purple rays come out of it. At the end of the door he sees a green lizard person sitting on his back, with a brown panty, a cape of that color, and next to the animal there is a newt. The PROTA gets a notification that the challenge will start in 30 seconds. He wonders if he should just defeat him, if it is a sudden one-on-one duel, and thinks about that single lizard person being stronger than a horde of goblins big enough to fill an entire city. He gets a notification that tells him that he must defeat the Dark Shadow Warrior ETHALT. The PROTA quickly draws his sword and shield because that notification gave the signal that the fight had already begun. The lizard stops and the PROTA thinks that being a dark warrior it was likely that he would not make a first move. He realizes how his enemy only observes him and that by his posture he will not be a common enemy. Because his aura is different, PROTA thinks that it is his first time seeing such a cautious enemy. The distance between them is very wide and he does not want to hurry. He scolds himself for being so nervous and realizes that by the posture they both have their abilities are similar, giving him to think that at least he is not overwhelmingly powerful. The PROTA, seeing his face, realizes that it seems to be made of stone, but thinks that it doesn't make sense since it was a monster, although he was eager to check it out. When the battle is about to begin, the lizard woman asks the PROTA about why she rejects him. He answers her if there is any reason not to do so, followed by telling her crazy lizard. The woman tells him that that is going too far and that it is wrong to judge others based on how they look. The PROTA thinks that she had not said something about her appearance and that it seemed that even in her own species she is not particularly attractive. He tells himself that he should concentrate because that Idalta is different from the other lizard men. You only had to see her strength, speed, the way she gripped her spear, and the way she approached a fight. It was something completely different from what the PROTA knew. The lizard woman, instead of rushing in aggressively like the other lizard men, she moved carefully and efficiently. After having dodged her opponent's attack calmly, she launches a counter-attack with that opening. That incredible reaction speed allows her to dodge with just a blink of an eye an attack, Plus she has an ability that allows her to vaporize her body and launch a barrage of physical attacks. The PROTA thinks that she may have an ability that simply increases her reaction speed or her cognition, and the vaporization ability with her self-evasion may be an extra improvement. But her vaporization ability also has something extra, and that is that it has an incredibly short duration. The PROTA gives her a blow with his sword and analyzes that she could dodge it, but she only received the onslaught with the shield in the face, which gives her to seem that it is not possible to use it continuously, similar to the blink of an eye. The PROTA thinks about forcing her to use her vaporization ability with normal attacks, then use the blink and wings to finish with a combo. They are battling, and the lizard woman tells the PROTA that he really is someone cruel, but if that is how he will be, she will use her brute strength to keep him by her side. Immediately, the PROTA thinks if she is also a yandere and how many types of character she has inside. She runs to attack him, and the PROTA thinks that if she is blinded by anger, it is a blessing for him that she enters like this from the front. He thinks that her vigor is incredible and that he will not be able to stop her from the front, so he activates his power of concentration and manifests to the lizard woman to test him, trying to stab him. The lizard woman breaks the shield of the PROTA with her trident. The PROTA cuts her hand and part of the arm with which the woman was holding her weapon. She tries to attack him, and he uses his blink power to push her away. She cries for the loss of her arm, and he thinks that they only exchanged a few blows. Besides, she didn't use her vaporization ability, so things didn't go according to his plan. But seeing the results, she had ended up suffering more, because he launched his attack thinking that he was going to lose his arm, and he succeeded. She screams at him that he is too cruel, and that she saw his intentions to kill her. If she had dodged a little later, it would not have been her arm, but her head would have been cut off. She tells him that if this is how he will act, she will not see him as a partner but as an enemy that he must kill. She starts to get bigger and stronger. The PROTA is amazed by what he had just seen. He thinks if this is the beginning of the second phase, and the lizard woman gives a strong step that breaks part of the floor, the battle begins. She stomps again, and the PROTA thinks that she could destroy the room, and by the appearance more corpulent, his enemy looks like a boss monster of the game. She runs to attack him and manages to push him against a wall. He thinks about how long she can have that form because he has already used blink many times and he only has 2 charges left. She throws a fireball that he manages to dodge by ducking. The PROTA runs out with his sword. From this comes out a blue energy, and when he is close, the lizard woman stabs it in his abs. He spreads his wings and she throws a fireball towards them. The PROTA thinks he could die, but he does not give up and draws a great inner strength that allows him to fly high. Back on the ground, he comments to his enemy how strong he is. She tells him if he had come this far to change his mind, and he asks her to give him some time. The lizard woman asks him what he means by give him time. The PROTA thinks that the woman who was jumping on him before was only calmed down by him telling her that he was going to think about it. He keeps thinking if he is a beauty in the eyes of the lizard people. He tells the lizard woman to give him a moment and thinks that he managed to stop her for quite some time. But he thinks that she is crazy and he doesn't know when she will attack him again. He quickly takes out his board and grabs the recovery and stamina positions. He drinks them, and the woman asks him if he is done thinking. He tells her to please give him a little more time since he needed to take up energy to concentrate on his thoughts. He takes out his sword and starts to repeat himself to concentrate. He thinks of an ability that had a 90% chance of failure even when he was training in the waiting room. If he fails, she will counterattack immediately. The PROTA thinks that using blink offensively was quite costly. He didn't think he would have to use it together with the wings of Teleria, but he has another trick up his sleeve. He thinks about the way he holds his weapon, but just using flicker to make his sword reach the opponent is not enough. If he only does that, using the wings is a better option. So he must use flicker and blade together, the speed in which he carries his sword and the speed in which he goes out with flicker. If he puts those two together, he can go against his enemy in high speed and cut her. The PROTA goes against her and shouts blinking orb, cutting her in half, activates his wings, and when he is close to her he cuts her neck, lands, and falls near the tail of the lizard woman, who grabs his leg and knocks him to the ground. The blow was so big that the PROTA can't get up. He raises his head and wonders if he had defeated his enemy and crawls to see if he was right. He sees the lizard woman and bloodied and with her tongue out of her mouth, so he thinks that somehow he managed to survive. He thinks that it has been a long time since he swam in the Styx and that his body doesn't move well. He thinks that he should use a potion, but thinks that he should just enter the portal and use blink, but realizes that usually when he completes a boss room he would recover immediately. He thinks that the message that he had completed the room has not appeared. He comes out of his thoughts when he hears the lizard woman telling him that he is a very cruel and horrible human. He sees her slowly crawling away, and the PROTA thinks about how crazy she is. He thinks about the lizard woman's sex drive, and that she has overcome just being focused on her suitor. He is still shocked by that, and that only he can move a little, plus Flicker is still in confrontation. His wings with Thalaria, but not his gun. He thinks about the gun he gave Park Yona and how useful it would be if he had it. He comes out of his thoughts when he sees the lizard woman approach and tell him that she will make him her husband. He thinks about the possibility of biting his tongue and dying, but realizes that this is not the time to do that. As the PROTA watches as the lizard woman approaches and tells him that she will make him her husband, he wonders why she will be so obsessed with him. He tells himself that he should concentrate and pulls out his board to see how his player status is. He notices that Flicker is still on cooldown, but he can still use the Thalaria wings. He can move his hands and his brain is still working fine. He sees a heat stone option and wonders if that might work, as lizard people are still reptiles after all, and they are cold-blooded. He thinks about reptiles being extremely weak to temperature changes, so he pulls the stone off the board and yells at the lizard woman to get close to him if she can, as he will shove the fireball down her throat. She keeps approaching him and comments that her husband will do it. He tells her that she is annoying, and being on the verge of death, she wonders how that is the only thing she can say. That makes her upset. She raises her hand and slams it on the ground. She stands still, and the PROTA thinks about how she stopped moving. He wonders if she must have run out of strength as he hears her coughing. He approaches and she tells him that he told her that she was strong. He never called her despicable or cowardly, nor did he curse her as a servant of the devil. She tells him that he recognized her and that Iswila is his other half. Even though he is a despicable little human, he was a strong male and tries to say that is why he would make him her husband, but the prayer goes as far as making him her. The PROTA wonders if she really died as the lizard woman is no longer talking or moving. He thinks about how she was getting scared and she wakes up telling him he is an idiot. He asks her if he was ever rejected by his kind. She tells him that, with a strange ability, the defensive nature that was long ago removed from a lizard man's instincts and sadness. The PROTA asks him if that is why she was happy when he said something good to her. He tells her that he feels a small taste of bittersweetness and guilt. But even if she had some kind of sad story, they were destined to kill each other. He apologizes, and into her mouth he puts the heat stone he had been hiding in his hand. At that moment he gets a notification saying that he has completed the 5th floor of the tutorial Hell difficulty. Another notification comes saying that all status abnormalities and wounds will be healed. Another notification comes saying that he has gained 1000 points as a reward for completing for the first time. Another notification comes saying that he has completed consecutive revenge floors in a single session, and for that he has gained 1.000 points as an extra reward. Two other notifications appear. One says that many gods have a negative view of him and that 3,200 points will be lowered. But the other notification says that many gods have a positive view of him and that is why he has earned 4,700 points. The PROTA thinks that he has completed the 5th floor and that a notification appears saying that with his player history as a base he will be given additional rewards. Another notification appears saying that many gods have suggested giving him a special skill instead of an additional reward. 74 gods in favor of that and 3 against. A notification appears asking him if he will approve that. He thinks that there is something complicated and that there is definitely something behind that. Since a gift from so many gods, it has to be different from an authority skill. The PROTA thinks that the last skill he got that way was wisdom from before the time of Babel. It is a good skill, but he has been starting to have more thoughts after talking to the monsters. He thinks about the probability that the gods are giving him gifts as a test and that they are enjoying his reactions as a result, as he doesn't think they are giving him a gift to help him. He realizes that there are more gods in favor than when he received the wisdom from before Babel times, and he thinks it is because that many gods want to give him that new ability. The PROTA is anxious about the decision he must make. If he rejects the ability, the impression the gods will have of him may do much more. That ability may be unexpectedly good, so he accepts the ability and he gets a notification saying he has achieved summoning the deceased. But it does not tell him what level. He gets a notification describing that the authority of an unknown god who refused to reveal his identity to the challenger. That ability can be used on an object which has the soul of the deceased imprinted on it as a means to revive them for a period of time. That is an authority constrained by a god. He has 5 uses remaining, and as an extra bonus the god of slowness was worried about him. The PROTA thinks about how amazing it is to be able to revive a dead person. Sarcastically, he thinks about how it's better to forget the game skills, as his new ability was at a miracle level. He thinks about if it was okay for something as amazing as that to appear, and wonders on if it's not completely related to the 5th floor. A green light with a yellow diamond appears above the lizard. He is given the explanation that it is the soul stone of the lizard woman Idalta, the soul stone of the strongest and the most powerful warrior among the lizard men inhabiting the Aden swamp. That stone could sell it in the store window. After reading that, the PROTA wonders if that is not telling him that he should revive Idalta, because if he does that she will start saying that he is her husband and will come for him. He wonders if they think he is crazy enough to dig his own grave. A notification arrives saying that the god of adventure feels sorry for that actions. The god of dedication has resentment towards him. The god of chaos feels bored and the god of combat condemns him strongly. The PROTA thinks he should just ignore that and a portal opens. He thinks from any point of view all those gods have a screw loose. So he enters the portal and falls into a field where Kirikiri tells him that trampling on a woman's heart is a very cruel thing to do. Then he tells her to stop and asks her if she wanted to see him mate with a lizard woman. She tells him to pass, and in the place where he was before, 2 notifications appear. The first one says to please designate the members of his group before entering the 6th stage. And the second notification shows him the current group members where out of 5 people the first one is him. While the PROTA and Kirikiri eat cake, she tells him that he is probably the first one to have been courted by the 5th floor guardian. She tells him that the reason the gods were interested out of the blue in him was because of a rare event like that. He asks her if she is treating his virginity as a joke, but she tells him to forget that and that there is something he wants to know. He tells her that he has been thinking about it since before, but after the 5th floor he seems more certain. She tells him she can't tell him that and wonders if now Kirikiri is reading his mind too. He remembers that the goblins and lizard men have their own cultures and societies, whether on another planet or dimension. They have their own worlds or if they were created based on an existing world, and for those worlds there is some tutorial happening outside the Earth too. He tells her that he has managed to understand that after seeing her attitude. The POTRA tries to tell her what he thinks are the monsters that have appeared on Earth, but seeing that she is silent without wanting to answer his doubts, he tells her that he won't say anything more. Kirikiri tells him that he was just saying his own conjectures, so it doesn't matter, but if he tries to get information based on her reactions, she will start acting differently too. He tells her that he understands and thinks that something like that is what happened the other time. He remembers when he asked her what happened to the people who died there and she didn't answer him, but changed her expression. He thinks that she should have warned him on the extra level, out of her good intention. He thinks that Kirikiri will always give him information that will help him, and trying to take advantage of a child's good intention is not good, so he apologizes to her. When they finish eating, they get up from the table and Kirikiri sees how the PROTA goes to a doorway. She asks him why he doesn't think about it a little longer, and he asks her if she was talking seriously. She tells him that she will never know if Idalta can become a good partner and tries to tell him a negotiation that he could make with her if he tries to convince her. But the PROTA interrupts her, telling her that he has no interest in negotiating with her. He tells her that getting her to calm down is impossible in the first place. So he tells her that he will go and buy an item next time after getting some points. He tells himself about changing his shield for a better one, but he doesn't have enough points to do so. So he will have to get over the 6th floor and get more points. Kirikiri tells him to at least buy a potion. He tells her he has enough and she tells him she doesn't think he has enough. She asks him if he will need many items on the 6th floor and ends up using the remaining points to buy more items. They say goodbye and she tells him to take care of himself. She also tells him that he better come back quickly, although she doubts that this will happen. The PROTA wonders how difficult can be the 6th floor, but the answer is given immediately by himself when he realizes that it is something that he has to discover. He arrives to the 6th floor and sees the notification that he must designate the members of his group before entering the 6th stage. He sees that in the part where it says the current members of the group there is only him and there must be 5 people. The PROTA realizes that out of nowhere he needs a group of 5 people, and that was crazy. He wonders where he will get people to put it together. Forming a group with a challenger of a different skill level would be impossible, and would only be possible with a challenger from the 6th floor in a difficulty of hell. The PROTA tells the system that he is unique in the hell difficulty to begin with, and that, although the system has no conscience, that situation is being too much. Sarcastically, he asks the board if he really thought that 5 people will survive to the 6th floor of hell. It was a mistake in an obvious way, and asks him if that was designed by the gods. since they are the only crazy ones who watch what the challengers do and talk about it all day long. The PROTA, what was he supposed to expect from them? And into his mind comes the memory of Idalta, that he can revive her, but he refuses to do that, and in that comes a notification that the god of adventure was disappointed in him. The PROTA tells the board to shut up and asks him if he watches it all day or what. He imagines the god of adventure as a fat old bald man with a white blanket, and that he was surely a lewd person. A notification pops up telling him that the god of adventure has been very surprised and he is shocked by his thoughts. The PROTA wonders what he is supposed to do about his fate at that point in the tutorial, as he is the one who is to blame for choosing the hell difficulty without thinking about it too. He remembers there was a case where a co-opus player would appear on the 6th floor on the hard difficulty. He thinks about the fact that group play was affected by so many challengers. There are people who worked hard to get there, and some people started discussing weapon or growth decisions. But still everyone died on the 1st floor, so the PROTA didn't understand how come he needed a group there. The members board keeps appearing there, and below is a button where it tells him whether he will enter yes or no. The PROTA thinks that the option to enter alone is a good thing, but he will have to do the work of 5 people and complete it by himself. He falls that it is an easy thing to say, but he is in the difficulty of hell, and doing the work of 5 men would not be easy at all. He thinks that if there were other challengers he could not compare himself with them, as he would definitely be above average, or at least that was what his confidence was telling him. He remembers that Kirakiri told him that he can get a special authority skill because of the specialties that the god of slowness has. If it wasn't for that, he wouldn't have managed to get that authority in the first place. He thinks it's okay, because the god of adventure granted him an authority because he felt nervous that the god of slowness gave him one. The PROTA had never felt that his skills were not enough after getting used to battles. His judgment, creativity, concentration, response, adaptability, reaction speed, perseverance, and tenacity. He had become stronger in every aspect, but still he wondered if he was able to do the job of 5 men in the difficulty of hell. He thinks to test it and presses the button that if he entered, he falls into a room where there is a small fire and a notice welcoming him to the 6th floor. Being in the room, the PROTA quickly details that there is a bonfire and 2 portals. He deduces that one must be to return to the waiting room, and in the other there is a notification asking him if he wants to challenge the test set. He remembers that he had heard in the community that there was a floor like this. They said that the whole floor was connected to a single test. That place was the one they called Bonfire Room. It is a space for team members to meet and discuss tactics to challenge that scenario. Many were interested in that place due to the fact that it was a safe area, and also had a magical campfire. Something especially interesting was the campfire fire, which would never spread or go out. Plus it also does not produce smoke. The PROTA remembers that they said you could even cook if you bought the ingredients from the store menu. There was even a challenger who wanted to stay and live in the campfire room. The PROTA wonders if he should cook something, but tells himself that this is not the time for that and that he'd better cook the next time he's there. He decides to enter the portal where the notification is asking him if he wants to challenge the test set, and he presses the yes button. He falls into a corridor and thinks he is on the 6th floor, although it looks very similar to the corridor on the 1st floor. He walks and realizes that instead of a portal there is a stone door, which has a notification telling him that he cannot leave, and wonders how that door is the exit. At that moment a notification arrives telling him that the test on the 6th floor has already started, and when he approaches he sees another notification of this one written the explanation of that test. Read that 50 years ago, since the cursed priests of the Bahar Church were chased from the pantheon. The church was a cult that revived the dead and turned souls into evil spirits, including Kijas. There were 16 priests. The persecuted ones were able to escape the hunt from the pantheon by taking refuge there, in the center of the White Mountains. The center of the White Mountains was once known as New World in the past. It is said to be a place where a god resided. The priests of the Bahar Church were trying to use the divinity fragments to plunge the continent into nightmares. The PROTA reads a message that says, "O brave warriors, until the holy knights of the pantheon arrive, you are the only ones who can stop them." As he finishes reading it, he thinks about how the brave warriors takes away all the seriousness and makes it sound ridiculous. A notice appears with the conditions to achieve success. The first one says that until the order of the holy knights arrives, the forces of death must be prevented from escaping from the White Mountains. The second one says that the forces of death must be overthrown and the 16 priests must be disposed of. The PROTA tells himself that he must only prevent the forces of death from reaching the stone door. He wonders if he must kill them all, including the priests. He stops thinking when many skeletons appear with capes, skirts, and swords marching at the same pace. The PROTA is surprised by the number of skeletons he sees and realizes that for their march to sound so loud there must be many of them. The PROTA thinks that they do not look very strong as individual opponents and that if he makes good use of that narrow corridor there would not be too much danger. Although there were many skeletons, he thinks that if the priests are necromancers, then the creation of those skeletons will not stop and they will keep coming one after another. The PROTA thinks that he will have to take care of those guys at a rate of speed exponentially faster than the rate of creation of skeletons. The PROTA remembers why Kirakiri told him that it would take him more time to return and thinks that no doubt that level is above his estimated level to pass for sure. He thinks that the biggest problems will be his stamina and his speed to be able to take care of those skeletons. Besides not being able to clear this for the 3rd session in 2 days, and it could even take him until the 5th session. He spreads his wings as he thinks that because of his size with them he will be able to block the corridor. There will not be a way for them to continue their march towards the stone door. The skeletons are approaching and he is hitting them until he realizes that their weak points are their skulls. If the skulls are not destroyed they continue moving. He also realizes that some skeletons are well equipped with helmets and carved armor. He deduces that those are the commanders and out of nowhere appear more skeletons with red cloaks and red eyes. The PROTA goes backwards until he reaches the door. He falls into despair when he sees the point he was taken to and that no matter how many skeletons he kills, they keep coming one after another without end. Even if he wants to kill the priests, so far he had seen no trace of them. After 2 days of constant fighting, the raid to the 6th floor ended as a failure. There is a pause in the story and the PROTA is in a room where there is an egg in the center of a pillow that has a glass capsule around it. There are wires connected to that capsule and around it sounds a melody. When he finishes wiping the capsule, the PROTA comments that he had already finished with the preparations, that he must do other things and needs more time. But if he keeps an eye on the egg, the dragon egg will hatch. Everything was already prepared for after it hatches. The first thing he will do is bathe it in elixir and give it the blessing that will give it a variety of stamina abilities. The dragon will drink diluted elixir and eat ground spiritual byproducts and large worms. The PROTA already had the giant mixer ready for the baby's food. Once it grows up a little, he will give it fairy larvae, because he had learned about magic and in case the dragon is born and does not accept him as a father. He says that he has already prepared the dragon's heart so it will not feel uncomfortable because of its appearance. Thanks to a person he was able to learn a lot about reptiles. Suddenly he gets a call from Kim Min Hyuk and when he answers he tells him that he is calling him to say goodbye before he leaves. PROTA tells him that he thought he was just going to be locked up living there, and that he will finally leave. His friend replies that he plans to go out and live a quiet life, to which PROTA replies that he is sure he will make it. His friend tells him that he doesn't think PROTA is going to be running around killing the monsters that appeared on Earth. The Korean server that adopted one of the strongest alarm clocks. PROTA had been one of the pioneers of that server. PROTA asks him that if he were to stay in Korea he would receive some kind of national merit, as he would have a say in political matters too, so they might not let him live a quiet life. The PROTA tells him that, if there was ever a day of the big conference, he would have gone to greet him in person before he left, and his friend replies that he was sick of the big conference, to which the POTRA tells him that he has forgotten that at first it was a pretty fun event, and his friend tells him that it was because he wasn't doing any work, unlike him who had to work very hard. He tells him that he was just standing in a corner hurting himself to raise his resistances, but somehow he did help a lot. The PROTA tells him that it looks like the conference would happen again very soon, and his friend asks him if he was serious. The PROTA asks him if he did not know, and his friend replies that it has been a long time since he stopped managing the civil militia. He asks him if Park Young knows about the meeting, and the PROTA tells him that he thinks so. His friend tells him that by that answer he thinks the meeting will not happen, as a big conference only happens when there is a serious problem in the tutorial. If the information about the big conference was leaked, the civilian militia should be on the move, as Park Young likes to nip problems in the bud. PROTA tells him that then the next big conference will happen sometime after she completes the tutorial. His friend laughs and asks him if anything has changed between him and Park Young. PROTA tells him that things are still the same and asks him why he is curious. His friend tells him that he thought it was time for them to get along, and PROTA tells him that nothing will change as long as he stays locked up where he is. His friend tells him that if he leaves, the only person he will be able to talk comfortably with Park Young is him, and that he should help her. The PROTA tells him that now he should be worrying about other people, and his friend tells him that he shouldn't behave like that. He still thinks that the girl likes him. The POTRA tells him that he probably said the same thing to the girl, and his friend says no. Then the PROTA tells him that he will send her a message and check. He asks him if that was okay, and his friend says that he should do whatever he wants. At that, his friend asks him if he really asked her because she was cursing him, and tells him that there are some lines that he should not cross because it seems that he has no common sense. The PROTA laughs, and his friend asks him what is funny, besides asking him if he was drugged. The PROTA tells him that his resistance is too much of a drag to be drugged, and tells him that he will talk to Park Yuma later. His friend tells him that if a big conference were to happen, he could meet the new guy. He asks him if he is still on the 6th floor, and the PROTA tells him yes. His friend asks him if he was not excited, and he tells him that he should not be that excited, as there are not many that made it that far. His friend tells him that he should not be that tough, as the guy looks like he is good, to which the PROTA replies that no one is as good as he is. His friend tells him that he is really strong, but that the new guy looked very compromising, and asks him if he thinks that a rookie can overcome the 6th floor. The PROTA tells him that being an archer they might not make it, but if they are given some objects they might, since the first 10 floors can be overcome with the right equipment. If they were lucky, they could get to the 30th floor like the Americans. His friend asks him how strong he was, and the PROTA asks him why he wants to know. He tells him that when he leaves, many people will ask him. He asks him again how strong he is compared to a D-rank monster. In the real world, people have ranks of monsters to classify them. In the beginning, it was from A to F. S was added recently, and G after that. G-rank monster is a nationwide threat, and there are 4 G-rank monsters currently on Earth. Once a G-rank claims their territory, they don't go away. A G-rank monster named Oklara took over New York. Then the United States confronted him. At that time, the strongest awakened armies in the world were mobilized. They defeated Oklara in the end, but there were casualties, including half of the most powerful awakened in the world. Those were the things that were heard from the new ones in the tutorial. Those who were there from the beginning have never seen such monsters. PROTA tells him that based on the information he has about those monsters, he thinks it is enough. His friend thanks him for such a simple answer that feels like he has heard before. They both laugh and end up talking about the past, from the time they met, the hardships and the funny moments they had lived together. The PROTA tells that he met him in Hayek a few times during the big conference, but those moments are precious memories for him, since he had been alone in the hardship of hell for all that time. He was one of his few friends and family. Even if his friend leaves, it doesn't change the fact that he can't see him. It just means that he won't be able to contact him through messages. His friend says goodbye, telling him that he will leave first and see him outside. But for the PROTA, it felt like a goodbye forever. He asks him to greet the people outside for him and thinks that he should leave too. He thinks that he was getting worried and leaves a note that says, "Greet Kira for me." Back to reality. The PROTA wakes up from a dream in which he had fallen. Around him there are some marble walls like from Olympus, and he realizes that he had had his first defeat. He had failed to complete the 6th floor, and at the same time, he finished round 3. The 4th round had started, and the PROTA wanted to try again, but the chances of completing it were low. He thinks that he had experienced death countless times from the 2nd floor, but he had never felt so defeated as that time. He thinks about how possible it is to complete it, how it is similar to the time he wanted to retire, when he had lost his cousin's skills, that is, when he was at his best, his most powerful stage, and all for losing to a novice player. He thinks that when he returned to that place he regained his main ability, but now his weak back, neck pain and slow reflexes had returned to how he was in his prime. He had become a superhuman as he leveled up, but now he had lost. The PROTA was in a complete defeat. The newly arrived people in the tutorial came with news, and that was that the Chungcheong region of Korea was completely destroyed. All the people in the tutorial and the PROTA were shocked after hearing that news. The challengers were troubled by the news that the new ones brought. Chungcheong had been destroyed, but the areas outside that zone were doing well. Perhaps because things were going relatively well in Korea. According to the news, it seems that they had placed defense lines in the north and south of Chungcheong to prevent the monsters from spreading out of the city. That was not enough to give calm to anyone. But to hear that Korea was relatively well, it was certain that other countries were out of danger. In the 4th session there was an uproar in the tutorial. When the session started, Park Yuma started a war against the old Rep Guild members. The reason why there were signs that they were becoming active again. The PROTA tells himself that he didn't think they would have anything in mind after seeing something so horrible on the day of the big conference, and also since the civilian militia is still active. The war had ended quickly. According to what PROTA had heard, 8 people were purged, and Park Yuna had personally blown the brains out of one of them. By that action, the issue of whether she would continue to lead the civil militia became a hotly debated topic. PROTA didn't know what to think, as she could become a brutal killer or a judge acting purely for justice. He thought that as long as she didn't cross the line, he shouldn't meddle. What he did know is that if things became serious, a big conference they would have to start. The PROTA thinks that if one day the big conference ends up happening because of her, he will just have to do exactly the same thing he did last time. Think about that. Kim Min-hyuk has also been keeping busy helping new people adjust faster. He created a guide and shared it with most of the community. He also created a system of gifts and exchanges using the auction window. The rule is that any items that cost 7 or 77 points are for individuals, so you should not bid on them. It is a simple rule, but very effective. Helping newcomers is a fact, but it will motivate exchanges between people as well. Until now, the auction window was mainly used for rankers to sell items they don't need cheaply. There wasn't much being traded most of the time. Since there were not enough points, they had to be auctioned at low prices. While Park Young was becoming more alert to crimes, Kim Min-hyuk was working to develop an environment where people could communicate easily. He wanted to establish a society and culture in the tutorial. He wanted to make it a pleasant place for people in every way he could. Instead of the few people on the 100th floor, he said that it is more important to concentrate on the environment around the people who will be on the lower floors. According to PROTA, the thought was not wrong because many people were left behind. A way for weak people was the answer that Kim Min-hyuk found. In the past few days, PROTA had not been playing alone. He had his own job. As the fourth session began, the rookies had reached hell difficulty. One had chosen the wrong option while drunk and the other had just waved his hand in the air as if it meant nothing, which seemed stupid to the PROTA, as he thought that his companions in the first session had chosen that level by choice. They wanted to do that level, although PROTA was the only one to survive. Still, PROTA taught the newbies everything he knew about the difficulty hell, taught them how to avoid, and gave them growth guides of different types. The PROTA was giving them lessons from the community board. When he explained that for now the important thing was to overcome the first trap, they had agreed to contact each other when they were in the waiting room and tells them that soon they should receive a message. The rookie who had chosen the hell level as anything was nervous as he was dodging the arrows, as they were very fast and he could not see them. The PROTA asks him what he means by not being able to see them, and the man replies that he had somehow managed to survive when he had fallen by accident, and asks the PROTA what he was supposed to do against something like that. At the end of the day, one of them could not get back and the other had gone crazy. The PROTA was disappointed, as he had gone out of his way to teach them, although deep down he had expected something like that to happen. Stressed by the situation, the PROTA wonders what he is supposed to do to save the people who end up in the hell difficulty. The POTRA explains to the one who had gone crazy to stay waiting in the waiting room. When the waiting time is over, he tells him to try to hold it in front of the portal. The PROTA tells him that he will send him food in the next session, but the last one gave up on challenging him, and the POTRA came to the conclusion that humans are very mentally weak beings. The guy would have to stay 30 days in the portal eating dried meat and water. Then he would stay a few days in the waiting room, and then another 30 days in front of the portal. He might have to spend his whole life that way. Kim Min-hyuk was working to bring other challengers from the lower floors to the higher floors, but when it comes to the difficulty hell, it was all in vain. The PROTA thinks that there is nothing more to do and he must walk his own destiny. He arrives at the campfire room and thinks about how the 6th floor must be completed while eating some marshmallows. From his pocket he takes out 3 gems. A pink one, which was the birth gem of the goblin Gractus, a purple gem, which was the birth gem of the goblin Goros, and lastly the yellow gem was the soul stone of the lizard woman Adalta. The PROTA thinks that if he uses the ability to summon the deceased, he can get 3 comrades, although he doesn't know if they would work as his comrades. But if he managed to convince them somehow, it might work his plan. He would end up with a team. They could split into 3 teams and could take turns fighting, so that they could conserve their stamina and add another member when in danger. Without commander appears, the extra member can go specifically to take care of him. If the PROTA was alone, he couldn't stop the walking skeleton soldiers while defeating the commander. If all 4 worked together to complete the floor, their plan could work. If the PROTA considered the width of the bridge, the strategy could work. The ability to summon the deceased was definitely useful. It might be believable if he told them that the gods gave it to him to complete the 6th floor. But the part in the indications of that ability where it said that a period of time was set was something that PROTA was concerned about. It just meant that when a good amount of time passed, the people he had summoned could disappear. The PROTA thinks that more floors will appear where they demand teamwork. Even if he completes that floor, at any moment he would run into a wall, getting temporary mercenaries to get past the 6th floor was not the answer for the PROTA, so he considers that if he keeps thinking about it in the long run, the right answer was to become strong enough to replace 5 people. He thinks about going back and trying not to die, challenging floors while barely avoiding death. And he will just keep going on and on and on. He thinks about not giving up no matter how many times it takes. The POTRA thinks that with that system his levels and skills will grow as long as he keeps challenging the floor. It's different from the real world, where you just destroy your body by working too hard. Since there's a waiting room, there is no reason for him to worry about accumulating fatigue and pain. It is the perfect environment for him to concentrate on his growth. The PROTA thinks that for the time being it is best to postpone the floor raid. Even if he uses some tricks, he will only end up hitting a brick wall on the next floor, and in the end, the only way to victory is to concentrate on his growth without rest. A portal opens and he thinks that if he fails he just has to go back to the waiting room. He just has to avoid dying and throws himself into the portal. He spreads his wings and sees all the skeleton troop from the first time. He repeats to himself that as he becomes more proficient, his level and skills will grow as well. The waiting room will allow him to recover completely. If he has a strong enough will, he will manage to climb any wall. The PROTA comes to the conclusion that the tutorial world is like an RPG in many ways, and that there is nothing that cannot be achieved with enough effort. He must show them the tenacity and persistence of a gamer, reaching level 20 by now. The 4th session ends and the raid to the 6th floor fails. In the waiting room is a girl with blue hair and purple eyes eating a chocolate bar while reading chat in the community. She reads that someone asks about why she wouldn't listen to him, and they reply that her death is because she didn't listen. The girl says that what she reads is from 8 years ago and she has read all the old stuff. She thinks that the waiting time is boring and she wants to go to the stage already. Her resistances and skill levels don't go up well when she is in the waiting room, and she thinks that Odyssey didn't say she had to do it anyway. Currently in the 6th floor challenge of Hell difficulty, the girl thinks that by looking at those old messages she can learn more or less a little bit about the history of the Korean servers. She thinks about Odyssey and how at first he was treated as a liar, but soon after he ended up as one of the highest rankers and one of the strongest in the tutorial. She thinks about how he really was amazing, and that she knew about him before she entered the tutorial. Odyssey was the only survivor of the Hell difficulty of the Korean server, and the strongest challenger, or at least that's what everyone says about him in the real world. Odyssey, or rather, Lee Ho-yi, was a former pro gamer. Tons of reports about his past started to come out, and also tabloids started to be printed about him. Yet the girl knew about him when she saw him on TV while watching her little sister watching him. She was the one who told her that he was a pro gamer. At that time, she thought he looked too good to be a pro gamer and should rather be an actor. She never thought about him again, and now it was ironic that he was her daddy long legs, her guide in that world. That girl had entered the Hell difficulty by mistake. But he had given her hope. He was her support, and without him she would have died. She comes out of her thoughts when she gets a notification asking her if she was ready and sees a call from Park Young. She realizes that she was the one who sent him the notification and that it was probably accidental. The girl answers and asks if something had happened, to which Park Young replies no, but that Appa had asked her to say goodbye. She wonders who the heck Appa is and thinks he means Odyssey. She has never called someone Appa before. She thinks about the rest of the community talking comfortably amongst themselves and even cursing each other. She hears Park Young tell her that she is going to get some points on the 61st floor. The girl is still thinking about who Appa is because she has never heard anyone say that name before, and she starts to feel worried. Park Young reminds her to tell her manager, and the girl thinks that Park Young is a bit abrupt, even a little hostile. She wonders if she called him Appa on purpose and replies to Park Young that if she remembers about her manager. From her mouth she quotes a girl like "you shouldn't meddle" and asks if it's something like that. She opens a portal, takes her bow and arrow, and tells herself that it's time to start the raid. When she enters, she arrives at the campfire room and a notification appears welcoming her to the 6th floor phase. She thinks that Odyssey did not teach her everything about that phase. He said that if she does not die instantly due to lack of knowledge, it was important to know how to acquire and use information. The girl agrees with that thought and remembers that the 6th floor has an endless army of skeletons. She must fight against the priests that create them. She remembers that there is also a method of holding out until the Holy Knights arrive there, but it is impossible to hold out against the amount of soldiers coming. She stops thinking and decides to enter the battle. She runs down the corridor and realizes that speed is vital on that floor. She summons a high-level magic stone and a potion of concentrated magic power, uses them by summoning the Fantu skill, and makes herself a kind of magic trap on the floor. Jumps from one end to the other after summoning the Sil style skill and realizes that using magic to fly there is much easier. Unlike Odyssey, the girl has no wings, but uses positions to be able to fly. The girl decides to set several magic traps and arrives at the beginning of the corridor. She tells herself that she must draw an explosive magic circle in the middle and just memorize the route. She uses her perception ability to see where the skeletons are and realizes that they are far away. She goes through the corridor and starts repeating a pattern. She starts left 3 times, right 2 times, left 6 times, and that's how she memorizes the route. She stands behind a wall and sees the skeletons approaching. She tells herself that it is time to kill, and invokes the ability Data Spill Keon. Her cloak begins to glow and repeats spiritual magic that can make me fly and give me invisibility. The cloak gives her the ability to move on the roof, and that's how she dodges the skeletons. The girl reaches the 16 priests and sees how a skeleton is transformed. She thinks that they will attack her the moment they see her, and at most she will last 6 seconds. That is her limit. So she starts shooting arrows from her bow that, thanks to her good aim, reach directly to the skull of a priest. She invokes the battle concentration skill and starts shooting arrows that fall to 3 priests. Suddenly one of them takes out from each hand 2 fireballs, and the ones she had not been able to attack come closer to scare her. She invokes the Phantom Arca skill and is teleported to the starting place where she had made a magic portal. She thinks that she was lucky to escape, but she has used a lot of high-level magic in a short time and she is running in the fumes there. However, she thinks she has done well that time and lies down on the ground because of how exhausted she is. But she tells herself that her story of survival and the difficulty of hell will have to continue. It is the 8th day of the 5th session in the history of POTRA. He gets the welcome notification again about the 6th floor phase and how test was about to start. He thinks that it will be at least 2 hours before the skeleton soldiers show up. He thinks that he is on a path that only wastes his time and wonders if he should raise his resistances. But he thinks that it is better not to do it since he is not guaranteed that he will be able to heal by the time of the battle. He can't use potions every time either. He wonders if he should do some exercise and starts to do a series of burpees. That series of exercises makes him a little tired, and he realizes that it was being more difficult than he thought, because he had stopped exercising since his body surpassed that of a non-normal human. He thinks that climbing the resistances is like running in the same place, so doing some basic exercise can be effective. However, he is forced to stop at the moment when he hears the skeletons approaching, so he says to himself that it is time to work. He cuts off the skulls of the skeletons that are approaching him because that is how they stop walking. He receives a notification telling him that he has leveled up. His strength has increased by 1 point, as well as his stamina, his magic power, the shield art skill, and the melee skill. But another notification appears telling him that he had failed the 6th floor test. Remember how someone once asked a muscular, blonde-haired, high-ranking player of a popular RPG game if it didn't get boring to hunt every day? The player answered his question with another question. He asked him if living gets boring, and when he got no answer, the player started to relate that life is a routine. He found himself doing what he liked every day, and it didn't get boring. The man tells him that's a smart answer. The PROTA remembers that he did not become a professional player because he liked a specific game, but because he liked to win, so he concentrated on a single game to become a professional. That is why he did not get bored of playing the same game, but he would like to ask that high-ranking player how he did not get bored. The PROTA keeps cutting heads while fighting the tiredness of seeing the faces of the skeletons, the sounds they made, how they moved their swords the same way every time, and feeling pain for those rusty swords. He says he is getting tired, but he must go on, because there are still good things about it. Swinging his sword had become ingrained in his body, as swinging his sword the same way in the same situation so many times had caused him to develop a sword style that he had become familiar with, which had caused his sword skill to increase. A notification appeared telling him that he had achieved level 10 basic sword skills, and had also moved up to level 7 in basic shield arts. But, even so, the 6th floor was not getting any easier, and again a notification appears telling him that he had failed the 6th floor test. The POTRA thinks about how as he leveled up through concentration in combat, his cognition also grew faster as a result. He has the memory of when he got the notification that he had leveled up to level 13 in battle concentration. He thinks about how his opponent's movements had become slower, but he had improved to the point where it seems like time stood still. He can only get to that level of concentration for a brief moment, but he has many opportunities to grow, and he is reminded of it by how he has leveled up in different areas. The PROTA makes a war cry that, due to its intensity, rises to level 2. That cry stuns the skeletons, and it is remembered that, in most games, 10 characters have that ability. As a result, their combat value will increase a little, although it is not certain how much. He arrives at the priests and they tell him that death will fall upon him. They point out to him as who is a knight of death and tell him that he will be the one who will take him to rest eternally. The bosses began to appear a little further inside. At first they had deceived the PROTA, making him believe that this knight was the final boss, but when he realizes that it is not so, he insults them and stabs the knight. A notification that he had failed the test of the 6th floor appears again. In the middle of PROTA's raid, a fort appeared on the road that made him slow down a bit. It was the skeletons that appeared even stronger on his way, and as a result, no matter which way PROTA went, the assaults would still come and open the stone door. He wonders in frustration what he should do, for giving up is not an option. The PROTA manages to hold out for up to 13 days, but the knights did not appear, and when he ran out of options he could not continue. It was not about strength but lack of stamina, so before the skeletons reached the stone door by the other way, the PROTA had to go complete the phase, being the best option, but the most difficult. The PROTA thinks that whatever he does, he must concentrate on his growth, attack the skeletons, and he receives notifications that he has reached level 8 of resistance. He has reached level 4 of pain and level 9 of resistance to paralysis. Even his resistances have increased. After the knight condemns him to death, he receives a notification that he has leveled up, and in each of his virtues he has increased 1 point. He arrives at the waiting room, and after getting the ability of magic circuits, it became possible to use the magic power that was inside him. Although it had cost a lot to understand the changes that circulated in his body by the magic power, with hard work he got that power in his hands, but only in a small amount. He realized that if he sent the magic power to his muscles, he had access to explosive physical strength. Practicing several times, the PROTA managed to pass that magic power to his sword, and when he did that, it looked like a blue lightsaber. When that happened, the PROTA liked to call himself the Joseon Sword Master, but as the magic power could end, and he had to find some kind of method for that. Returning to battle with the skeletons, one of them exclaims to the servant of a false god, "Witness the strength of the great abyss. The unique and absolute being in that reality will bring salvation to that irrational world." The skeleton sees the PROTA and tells him that he is brave but foolish, that he had taken the wrong path, and that Kija would send him to his death. Stabs him, and the PROTA appears again in the waiting room, lying on the floor with the notification that he had failed the 6th floor test. It goes back to the part of the story where the PROTA is in a room where there is a capsule that protects a dragon egg. The PROTA is finishing the grimoire of dragon use. He thinks about how crazy it is that dragons have not had a grimoire, because they are a magical race, and they learn magic naturally as they grow. Plus they do not lose their memories no matter how much time passes. They never had the need for education or grimoires where point and store all the magic. He complains out loud about how annoying a dragon race is and quickly clarifies to the drag egg that he wasn't talking about him. He stares at him and thinks that even though dragons don't need magical education, if he can teach him something, the dragon's learning will be fast. He thinks that he will have to teach him high-level magic required for the raid on the 61st floor, because there is no time for him to learn everything by himself in a natural way. The PROTA thinks about the things he wrote in the Grimorium. Because he had avoided putting things that a dragon wouldn't need, he filled the notebook with chance and internal magic power. He comes out of his thoughts when he gets a message from Park Young, 90th floor, asking him about his report. He quickly writes her hell difficulty, 60th floor, residential district, all clear, and sends the message. He thinks about if there is any reason why every month he has to report like that, and asks her if she is not tired of those reports. She asks him if he wasn't tired of her having to remind him every month. He tells her that he gets a message from her about it because he is always late, so he asks her the reason for her delays. He thinks that she is in a bad mood and that it will be better just to let that brush of words pass. The PROTA apologizes to Park Young and tells him that he just tries not to get too specific on how much time has been going on, and that he likewise tries not to look too much at the messages that come to him, as it seems he has been in there for a long time and feels he may become mentally ill again. He tells her that his medications are not working anymore, but it is all a lie. She apologizes to him and tells him that she did not know he felt that way. Tells him that he should not write her monthly reports anymore and will ask a certain person when she needs to hear from him. The PROTA thinks that everything went as planned and it was time to get rid of another annoying thing. He asks Park Young if he can pass her a message while he is firing Lee Young-hee, as he will go to the 61st floor. She asks him what he will do there, and he tells her that he has been using too many points, so he should get more. She asks him what he wants her to tell her, and he proceeds to tell her. He asks her not to forget to tell the administrator and thinks of but Park Young tells him that it would be better if that is something that comes out of his mouth. She asks him if the girl is not on the 60th floor and he says yes. Park Young tells him that the growth of the blue-haired girl and the bow had reached a safe point. He tells her that Lee Yeon-hee managed to adapt well to the 6th floor and it was praise that she was worried about. He tells the PROTA that it may take some time, but that girl would come to a discovery very soon. He tells her that that girl has talent, not as much as him, but she has. Park Young tells her that to overcome the weakness of an archer, Lee Yeon-hee learned from enchanting magic. Those abilities can be activated by giving magic power while saying some incantation like data still. Keon is not very powerful and not very modifiable, but it is easy to use and has a short casting time. PROTA tells him that it is easy to learn as well. Originally it was called half-baked magic, however. Things have gotten to the point where it is harder to find a traditional mage as opposed to an enchanter mage. Besides that, it is basically a fact that the archer-enchanter hybrid is powerful. PROTA thinks internally that is why he had agreed and gave him his support. To change the subject, the PROTA comments to Park Young that he had heard that something was going to happen soon. He asks her how true it is and she tells him that, yes it is. He tells her that people have been talking about it. Although it's not something confirmed yet, she will have to look more into it. He comments that it would be good if it was a big conference day as anything else would be upsetting. She tells him that if it is a big conference day she would not leave him alone. In an annoyed tone she tells him that the civilian militia has been slacking off a lot and he is shocked by what he hears. He tells her that she is killing them with so much nagging and the civilian militia guys have been complaining to him for several days now. She asks him about who and he writes down their names in a message he passes them. He thinks he is sorry but he can't afford to die. Park Young tells her that Kim Min-hyuk was gone too, and the PROTA tells her that now she will have to play the role of the mother for now too. She is dumbfounded by what she hears and tells him that she can't do that. The PROTA thinks about how he doesn't think they can replace Kim Min-hyuk because Park Young doesn't trust anyone anymore. He thinks about how he should stop him when he said he wanted a divorce and she tells him that no one expected him to leave the moment he got that deal. They hang up the call and the PROTA thinks about how ironic it is that the person giving dating advice was the same person who ended up in a divorce and leaving out of the game. The PROTA walks around the room a bit and thinks back to the grimoire, that what he had written down should be enough, but that anyway after the dragon hatches he should continue to find out more information about magic. He goes over to see the egg and wonders what color the dragon will be, as they used to be black, gold or red. He tells her to watch the house while he goes to get some money. He summons some guards to take care of the egg because that baby and the PROTA are the only ones on that floor and he didn't want to leave him alone. His clone appears and tells the PROTA that he is a main body bastard. He ignores him and gives him his task. The clone tells him that if he remembers that he is in a temporary residence and asks him to put him as the main body. The PROTA denies and thinks that even though that clone is created based on him, he was somewhat weak and malevolent. The clone reminds him that he can read his mind and asks him about who he was calling weak. The PROTA tells him that he will know if anything happens to the egg. The clone asks him not to take his existence lightly, but the PROTA ignores him and bids him farewell. The PROTA had created that clone to complete the 61st floor, but unfortunately he was unable to complete that floor and his clone had become useless, but he used it to guard his house. It was 1095th day of the young man's imprisonment in that world. He was walking on the desert sands and was already exhausted and breathing heavily. Thoughts of escape did not leave the dark-haired young man for a second. Drops of blood were dripping from his bandaged right hand. He was haunted by suffering, frustration, and despair. When life became completely unbearable for the young man, she appeared, a girl with ash-colored hair and amber eyes, and kindled a flame of hope in him. The dark-haired man stuck his sword into the sand, continuing to hold it by the hilt with his left hand. With his right hand, he was hugging a girl who was holding on to him. Blood was flowing from his forehead to his chin, but this did not prevent him from looking somewhere with determination. He wished with all his heart to get her out of this world alive and unharmed. But there were enemies and pyramids on their way. They looked like the gods of Egypt. One had a black skin color, the head and legs of a cat. The other had the head and legs of an eagle. There were other godlike creatures advancing there, but nevertheless they had two similar features, namely, huge height and clothes in the style of ancient Egypt. Chosen by heaven, a genius with a difficult fate. In pursuit of the girl, he was struck by lightning. The guy was wearing a VR helmet with wires running from it. He was all warped by lightning. A diligent student, a kendo master with zero experience in love affairs, who has not played a single game. A child, a stranger to everyone. due to unforeseen circumstances, chasing a girl, who began his journey through the game in another world. The young man was warned that his location area was outside the service area. There are terrible natural conditions in that zone, the area to which the signal does not reach, and there are also angry animals. The only way to survive in that world is to continuously deal with monsters, defeating them, and become stronger, and also multiply experience points. Here the young man dealt with a pack of monster wolves and was congratulated on reaching the 15th level, receiving 24,000 experience points, and also informed that 50 points could be distributed. Also, in order to survive, you need to change weapons to a stronger one, be it swords, axes, halberd or other weapons, as well as armor. And there is also a system of mercenaries, namely warriors, chimeras and seers. It may seem that the scheme of increasing the level is extremely simple, until the gods of murder get in the way. For the first time, the young man felt such a piercing fear, as if his will was completely suppressed when he faced them. It's as if he's a mouse in a cat and mouse game, as if God is preparing to deliver his verdict. The dark-haired man was tense because he did not understand how everything turned out like this. However, the young man, constantly stumbling, getting more and more wounds and injuries, he got up every time. Losing, the young man tries again and again, even when his life is on the line. In the end, his will to fight activated the special blessing of the goddess Latona, granting him plus 100 units to all attributes, namely strength, speed, damage, and endurance. A large school building. If you look through the windows, you could see how the students were sitting at their desks and studying. Here is one of the students, a young man named Chen Jil, also sat like the others and studied. Gil had brown hair and amber eyes. He was dressed in an orange hoodie, and over it was wearing a uniform jacket of his school. In one, he already had an earpiece sticking out from under his jacket. The young man thought that in the eyes of others, he was a diligent high school student. There were no difficulties for him that he could not solve. Until recently, until Gil fell in love with a troubled girl. This girl had pale red hair and green eyes. She asked Gil to do her homework for her, as she would go on a quest in the evening. This girl's name is Kin Xiaomai. The teacher began to scold the girl for sitting on the desk during the lesson. That's how she talked to the young man. At the same time, she had a chupa chups in her mouth. The girl handed her notebook to the young man. The young man's cheeks turned pink, but his expression remained serious. He took the notebook from Kin Xiaomai's hands and agreed to her words. The girl asked him what else he wanted to ask. Gil called Xiaomai by name and asked if he could try to play a game with her. But their conversation was interrupted by the teacher, who kicked the girl out of the classroom for interfering with the lesson. Already leaving the office, Xiaomai, with a smile on her face, agreed to Jill, while saying that they just lacked support and let him come to the newcomer's village at 8:30 in the evening. Her idea's sweetheart. Some time later, returning home after school, Gil was walking under an umbrella as it was raining hard outside. He was replaying the nickname Xiaomai in his head. When Gil came home, water was dripping from his feet. He said that he had come. His mom said that he came early that day. The young man answered her that because of the spoiled weather they were released early. His mother had the same amber-colored eyes and hair, a shade lighter, curls lying on her shoulders. She was holding a ladle in her hands. She told her son that it was raining heavily, and also that while dinner was being prepared, he could rest. Gil changed his sneakers into slippers and walked down the corridor and asked his mom if he could order from the delivery, to which she agreed and what she would leave behind his door. When his mom went into the kitchen, Gil put on a serious expression and looked at the box that was lying on the floor in the hallway. The inscription Cosmos was written on the box. When he was walking with a smile on his face to the stairs, his mother asked about his passion for games, and also reminded him that he needed to give himself a rest. But the young man did not answer her, and when Gil was already walking up the stairs, she told him not to forget to eat. Again, having received no answer, she assumed that someone had called him to play, perhaps a girl. Gil has already unpacked the box in his room. The weather was still bad outside, lightning flashed and it was raining. The young man was lying on the bed, one arm thrown under his head, and the other was holding a VR helmet on his chest. Cosmos is currently the most popular VR game. To play it, just one helmet is enough, on which the name of the game was written. In fact, this is the first gaming experience of a young man. He assumed that Xiaomai was already an expert in the game. But even so, he was confident that he could handle it. Then he received a message from a girl who was already waiting for him, asking him to get into the game faster. The young man connected all the necessary equipment and put on a helmet. For Jill, this is Beth, one might say, the first date with Xiaomai. After these thoughts of his, the connection to the game Cosmos began, during which he began to get into the virtual world. An immense room and blue flowers appeared before the young man's eyes. Here, a system notification of the game appeared with thanks for the purchase of Cosmos. Gil was surprised. Another notification appeared before his eyes informing him that Cosmos is a survival game. In it, players will experience the stories of myths of all countries. In the world of the game, dangers will await players from all sides. In it, they can find treasures and encounter miracles. The system suggested that Gil choose a class and start the adventure after that. The young man agreed with this proposal. After that, various classes appeared before his eyes. There were a warrior, a combat monk, a shooter, a wizard, a paladin, a sorceress, and many others. The young man remembered that Xiaomai had mentioned support. Gil saw Hiller's class and selected it by clicking on the icon. For the purchase of the game, certain free clothes were available to him, which appeared before the eyes of the young man. Pantsuits, jeans, a sports jacket, and accessories were displayed there. Gil thought about wearing something formal on a first date. That's why he chose a graphite-colored pantsuit, under it a white shirt and a blue tie. After that, the loading of the game started. Meanwhile, in the real world, weather conditions were getting worse and worse. The red level of weather danger was declared. Citizens were asked to turn off electrical appliances in order to avoid accidents. Lightning struck the roof of Gil's house. Since the Cosmos game equipment was plugged into an outlet, the current charge first got into the game's power supply, and then went through the wires to the VR helmet. The young man was looking forward to the beginning of the first date with Xiaomai, but then he was struck by an electric shock. Gil didn't understand what was going on at that moment. Being under tension, the young man flew over his bed. Current discharges sparkled all around. Outside the window of the young man's room, a blue glow was visible. After that, one helmet fell on the bed, which was battered. At that moment, his mom started coming into Gil's room. She asked her son to check if they had turned off all the equipment, but when she entered the room, she did not find Gil and wondered where he had gone. There was a horde of orcs in the dark forest. They surrounded the girl, who was sitting on the ground in partially torn clothes. A sword lay broken in half beside her feet. The girl screamed for help in fright. Then the orcs were blinded by a bright light, after which a large number of golden lightning appeared. So, next to the girl who was Xiaomai, Gil appeared, which she was glad of. Thanks to the young man, the orcs burned in the fire. Gil helped Xiaomai up, while apologizing to her for the delay and saying that she had nothing to fear now. Trees were burning around them. But despite this, Gil and Xiaomai looked into each other's eyes, while their faces were close. Xiaomai told the young man that he was her hero. After that, they got closer and closer to each other, saying their names. Then they kissed. The young man felt his lips getting wetter and wetter. In fact, there was a chameleon sitting on the young man's chest, licking the young man's face. When the young man finally realized what was happening, he sat up abruptly, shouting the girl's name. He was in the desert. Gil was trying to figure out what had happened, because it felt like real. The young man looked at his hands with the thought that electricity seemed to have passed through his body, but at the same time, the sensations were pleasant. Gil got up and decided to take a better look at the place he was in. Before him stretched boundless sands and a bright blue sky. He was hot, and so he decided to relax his tie and unbutton the top buttons of his shirt. Everything seemed very realistic to him. The young man remembered that the first time he was supposed to be loaded into the village as a novice, but there was no one in the place where he appeared. After that, he decided to write to Xiaomai. He entered the girl's ID, but the system did not find her, moreover, informing that the player would not find her, asking to enter the ID again. It seemed strange to Gil, in a way that it shouldn't be. The young man was sure that he remembered the girl's ID correctly. Gil decided to go to the novice village, because Xiaomai was waiting for him there. The young man had already walked some distance. He was already out of breath, and even the jacket thrown over his head and shoulders did not help. He decided to open a map of the Cosmos game system. The map showed him his location, marked with a dot. It was written there that this is an unconfirmed region whose climate is a desert, but the coordinates were unknown. Looking at the map, Gil thought that he was mistaken, because there was no novice village there. The young man did not understand exactly where he got. Then the system notified Gil that the area of his location was outside the service area. The young man was amazed and frightened by this information, because he realized that there was no communication even with the support service. This was not normal. Also, Gil began to reflect on the fact that on a hot day, about 900 milliliters of sweat are released every hour. Fainting and dehydration are a matter of time for him. He didn't like this situation. The young man did not expect that the games were so difficult. He remembered that Xiaomai was waiting for him, so he decided to quit the game and ask her about the situation. He decided to click on the system panel. The answer is yes to the question, does he want to quit the game? But then trouble was waiting for him. Namely, a red window of the system appeared informing that they had attempted an unauthorized exit. Error code KOSMOS 15. Gil was in a panic. He pressed the exit button again and again, and each time the system informed him about an unauthorized exit. The young man did not understand what kind of unauthorized exit he was talking about. It dawned on him that he was trapped in the game. Unexpectedly, the system issued a notification about a new task, which surprised Gil. This task was called Survival. The time to complete it was unlimited, and the reward and punishment were unknown. Gil fell to his knees and said that he just wanted to play with a girl. So why was he locked in the game then? Abruptly, he slammed his fist into the sand. After that, he sat down, reflecting on the fact that he had already tried everything. But he could not get out. He was scared of the idea that he could stay in the game forever. During the 8 hours spent in the game, his faith in his own strength had dried up. But he got used to the idea that he would not get out of the game. The game world is very similar to the real one. The heat and thirst make him feel sick, and he also gets dizzy. If he doesn't come up with something, then Jill may die. But this arrangement does not suit him, so he needs to find water. Picking up a stone from the sand, the young man, looking at it, remembered that his grandfather once watched a program about survival. It mentioned that the kind of stones, one of which he picked up, can be found near a water source. His eyes widened when he looked at the rocks and realized his thoughts, because the water is where there is a lot of slate, a stone about which he thought and raised. After that, he immediately rushed off, but Gil at that moment did not notice the animal, which was not far behind him. When he finally came to the rocks, he leaned on one, hoping in the correctness of his assumption. This rock was the wall of the cave. Looking ahead, Gil saw water dripping from the ceiling of this very cave into a recess that was already sufficiently filled with water. He swallowed, then rushed to this recess with water. After that, he began to drink water greedily while rinsing his face in it. It was nice for him to feel alive. But while the young man was drinking water, suspecting nothing, a wolf came up to the cave. Gil was lying in a cave, and the system window was open in front of him. He solved the water issue, so now he needs to think about how to get out of the game world. The young man took a sitting position and opened the system window. He suggested that, since this is a game, there must be some kind of clue in the desert. Gil was looking at the game map again. Only the explored area is displayed on the map. He knew perfectly well that it would not be easy for him. Just in case, Gil decided to study the system data. He opened a window with his own characteristics. His ID, Gil, he had a first level and a support class. His status was hunger. The young man's health and mana were equal to 100 units, but he had 0 points of opiate. Strength, agility, and armor were equal to 1 unit. Intelligence and endurance were equal to 3 units. Gil's ability was healing. The system gave him a hint, namely, that the acquisition of abilities requires the presence of a certain level or the fulfillment of specified conditions. Gil exhaled sadly, as he understood that his indicators were low. No level, no abilities. In case of danger, he will have to rely only on the speed of his feet. He didn't understand about the set conditions. After that, Gil wanted to see what kind of equipment he had. An iron sword, leather gloves, mercurochrome in the amount of 3 pieces, and a bandage in the amount of 3 pieces appeared to his mind. The iron sword belonged to the weapon class. Its strength was 100%. Its weight was 4 kilograms and the damage ranged from 2 to 8 units. Leather gloves belonged to the armor class. Their strength was 100%, and they also gave an increase in armor in the amount of 2 units. Mercurochrome belonged to the consumable class, and the effect was to restore health by 50 points. The bandage also belonged to the class of consumables. The effect was health. The system offered Gil to get a starter kit. The young man agreed to receive the set. After that, a sword and gloves began to materialize in front of him in a blue glow. When they fell, Gil, looking at them, thought that it was strange for the support to have a sword. He walked over to the items and took them. He hung the sword in the scabbard on his belt, and he immediately began to put on gloves. Gil himself realized that this equipment would be useful to him for safety. The young man began to make trial blows in the air, after which he took more air into his chest, turned around and sharply cut the stone in half. Looking at the sword with a serious look, he thought that this sword is much stronger than a real weapon. The system notified him that the strength of the sword had decreased by 1%. Considering the sword, he emphasized that there are many visualizations in the game, since even the degree of wear is displayed. His stomach began to rumble, carrying a loud sound through the cave. Gil decided to go and look for food while there are no clues, because he won't last long hungry. Already at the exit of the cave, the young man heard a sound behind him. He didn't understand what that sound was. Gil decided to go look at the source. The further he went, the more he noticed that the cave was of impressive size. He decided that since he had dealt with the thirst, he could look around. A bone rolled out in front of him. At first he saw her, but after the young man looked up, he was very shocked. He saw a large number of bones, both large and small. They were animal bones. The young man wondered where a pile of animal bones could have come from in the cave. Gil picked up the bone that had just rolled out to him. He saw some slits on it, and then remembered that there were photos of such marks in the books. Those were teeth marks. His business is bad, because you can't stay in the cave. After that thought, Gil turned around and started running. But then a wolf jumped out in front of him with its mouth wide open in front of the young man's face. Gil managed to duck, and then roll away from that place. He was attacked by a level 5 desert wolf. The wolf had a sandy-colored coat, with some small black lines on it. The wolf's advantage was fortitude. It reaches speeds of up to 10 kilometers per hour in the heat and up to 15 kilometers per hour at night. And when chasing prey, a wolf can accelerate up to 65 kilometers per hour. The main type of wolf attack is a bite. The strength of this bite was 200 kilograms. The wolf's weakness was an unprotected belly. The system warned the young man that their difference with the wolf was 3 levels. For him, the chance of defeat was high, or rather, receiving damage of 200%. At this moment, blood trickled down from Gil's right hand, as the wolf still managed to touch him. The young man was breathing heavily, and he was also convinced of his guess about the monster in the cave. He acknowledged the fact that the monster is much faster than him. Gil knew it was useless for him to run, so he would have to fight. After this decision, the young man began to draw his sword from its scabbard. Gil decided for himself that to lose is to die. At the same time, his gaze burned with determination. Gil recalled his time in high school, when he served as the head of the kendo club. How he practiced blows with a bamboo sword in special clothes. There were cups in the auditorium of the club. The young man was the youngest master in the country of Z with the 6th dan. Why would Gil study a martial art like kendo? The reason is simple. In his youth, his mother was a fan of this sport. They watched the matches together on TV. And even then his mom was obsessed with the kendo star of the country D, Kimura. She was incredibly happy with each of his victories, especially when she watched the broadcasts with little Gil kissing him on the cheeks. That's how he started doing kendo from early childhood. At the age of 5, Mom sent Gil to the kendo section. When he first started, he thought that kendo was simple. You just need to wear nice clothes and fight pretentiously. But, having gone a little deeper into training, Gil realized that the movements were not easy. And standing in front of an opponent dressed in a uniform, his heart is pounding, his breathing is strained, and a veil of horror tightly envelops him. At such moments, even the body can barely be made to move. The source of all this horror is his own weakness. At that moment, O got his first kick in kendo. The only way to get rid of weakness is continuous training. Constant work on yourself, constant overcoming of laziness. That's how it happened that he spent all his time in a dojo that didn't have air conditioning, honing every move many times, constantly losing, constantly being injured, constantly exercising, doing swing after swing. And so it went on until Gil became the youngest master in the country of Z with the 6th dan. In a world where the law of the jungle reigns, it is impossible to predict how terrifying the next opponent will be. At that moment, the wolf jumped on the young man again. Gripping the sword tighter in his hands, Gil realized that the moment had come for his actions. Namely, the attack that followed, on the back of the wolf. The wolf should not underestimate Gil. But this attack had no effect. His hands and the sword in them were shaking. The wolf wasted no time attacking Gil again, this time with his tail on his stomach. The young man flew off because of this blow into one of the walls of the cave. Gil was trying to catch his breath and wondered how the sword hadn't done any damage to the wolf at all. The system reminded the young man that the desert wolf has extremely powerful armor, and that its weak point is its belly. Gil realized that it was useless to hit somewhere other than the belly. The wolf went on the attack again, trying to close its jaws on Gila. The young man himself at that moment thought that everything was clear to him with a weak point. But the wolf still remained too fast and tried to bite him every time. Then Gil braced his feet against the cave wall. The thought flashed through the young man's mind that if he only defended himself, he would lose sooner or later. He was afraid that he might die in this world. There was a red notification from the system informing Gil about the low health reserve, so he needed treatment. The young man was visited by the idea of how to get to the belly. The wolf charged again. Gil also went for his opponent, hoping that his idea would work and he would be able to finish off the wolf. Blood started dripping onto the floor. It was the blood of a young man, which began to drip from the shoulder, which the wolf had bitten through. while holding Gil's torso with his paws. Gil was calm and stuck his sword into the wolf's stomach, rejoicing in his own victory. After that, he pushed the wolf away from him. Gil deliberately allowed himself to be bitten by the wolf in order to relax his vigilance and get to a vulnerable place. At the same time, blood was flowing from his mouth and he was breathing heavily. A system notification appeared in front of his eyes informing him that the desert wolf was defeated, and he received 6,000 experience points, reached the 5th level. 25 skill points were available to Gil. A golden glow enveloped Gil. His wounds have healed. The young man noted that after receiving a new level, the wounds were healed. Another notification of the system has appeared informing about the launch of the hidden level trading platform system. Gil didn't understand what it was. Gil reminded himself not to forget where he was, namely, in the world of the game, where it is typical to give experience points for killing creatures, and for raising the level, points for distribution. Sitting on the ground, still in the same cave, the young man looked at the system window. He wondered what a marketplace was. Gil decided to take a look, then clicking on the sign-in icon. A golden glow enveloped him, and the wind rose. Icons with different types of weapons and armor appeared in front of him. There were displayed swords, daggers, halberds, katanas, and much more. Gil, looking at all this abundance of items, realizing that this is the marketplace. The system has opened a window with items that are also sold on the marketplace. A certain level is required to unlock them. For everyday goods, a 5th level is required. For medicines, the 15th level is required. Weapons require the 30th level. Level 30 is required for armor. The 50th level is required for home equipment. For household appliances, the 70th level is required. The 100th level was required to unlock the mercenaries. Also, the system informed Gil that a certain level is needed to unlock the inventory, and also that when buying items on trading platforms, the level is spent. Gil found it unusual that in addition to weapons and armor, the store has home equipment with electrical appliances. He wondered who would buy household appliances in the game at all, so also for such a number of levels. He also drew attention to the fact that the mercenary system generally requires 100 levels. The young man decided to open it and see what would happen there. In front of his feet and himself, some kind of small portal appeared, from which numbers flew out. A ninja girl appeared from this portal. At first it scared Gil a little, but then he realized that it was a hologram. Then the same portals began to open. Then the young man saw an armored warrior, an ironclad tank, and a magician completely hidden behind the assassin's clothes. Gil was struck by the diversity of these mercenaries. But then he saw a charming-looking support girl. The young man was embarrassed by her appearance, turned around and went in the other direction, asking on the topic of who came up with such a helpless class. Also, he thought about the fact that the game wants him to be stuck forever. A system notification appeared in front of Gil with information that with the current level, it is possible to unlock only everyday goods. The system asked him if he wanted to unblock them. Gil irritably replied to the system that he remembered about this fact, while telling him not to remind him about it. After that, the system informed him about the unblocking of everyday goods for 5 levels. Their activation was successful. The boys received sugar buns in the amount of 5 pieces and Coca-Cola in the amount of 3 pieces. He was sitting on the ground in a cave and eating with the thought that for some time he would be able to survive on what he had bought. There were bottles and boxes of groceries next to him, but nevertheless, Gil still knew that he had to get out of there. Gil asked the system to show him the characteristics window. After that, it appeared in front of him. The characteristics remained the same, except that his status changed from hunger to satiety, and rapid recovery was added to his abilities. Also, he had 25 points available for distribution. After the distribution, changes were not possible. The young man's status is now alright, but it is still unknown how he can get new abilities. Gil thought about the fact that he would have to temporarily rely on the increase in characteristics. He realizes that after the distribution, the points cannot be returned and that the characteristics will directly affect his future fate. Armor determines survivability, magic affects damage from magical attacks, strength increases physical damage, endurance improves defense, and agility improves speed. The young man recalled that in the fight with the desert wolf, the difference between them was 5 levels, but in strength and speed, he slightly surpassed him. Gil understood that if he faced other brutal monsters, it would be good for him to become faster and increase damage to win. He decided to distribute the points in such a way that 5 points went into armor, and 10 points each went into agility and strength. After that, he confirmed the distribution in the system. The young man thought that 5 points of armor would make him more resilient, 10 points of strength would help him better withstand the attacks of monsters, and the remaining points would increase his speed. Gil was enveloped in a small aura of pinkish color, and he realized that after strengthening the characteristics, the body also changes, or rather, it is filled with power and becomes more plastic. He smiled, because for him it was quite a pleasant feeling. Then he heard a sound behind him and turned around. It was a pack of desert wolves. The young man stood in a fighting stance, preparing for an attack. For Gil, this was very useful, since he would just evaluate the result of his reinforcement. The wolves charged, and so did the young man. He told them that there would be nothing left of their lair after the fight. One of the wolves jumped with an open mouth on his sword, after which it was chopped up. With Gil's current damage, the wolves' armor won't save them. The young man's level has been raised. Another wolf at that moment decided to come from the back of the young man. But it did not help him, because Gil had defeated him. He was struck by the thought that the enhancement of characteristics improves the art of the sword. Gil jumped over the enemies, while his sword flashed. When he landed, several wolves were defeated at once. The young man moved with lightning speed, defeating his enemies one by one. His level went up and up. After defeating the entire pack of wolves, Gil sat on their carcasses and exhaled heavily. The system congratulated him on reaching the 15th level and receiving 24,000 experience points. 75 points were available for distribution. Gil happily thought that it was much easier to kill monsters with an increased level. When the young man came out of the cave, it was already night. He was surprised by this and thought that he had food and water, and while it was cool outside, he could look for a way out of the game world. But before he could really move away from the cave, he came across part of a pack of wolves. Defeated wolves. They were lying here and there. Their bellies were without fur and skin, revealing a view of the bones of the ribs. Gil didn't understand why they were all dead and began to wonder about it. But he was interrupted by a sharp noise from one of the rocks. The young man turned his head in that direction, while grabbing the hilt of his sword. In the moonlight, a humanoid silhouette was visible on that rock, holding the carcasses of the wolves he had defeated. Gil did not understand who it was while trying to make out the face of that creature. To Gil, the situation seemed very strange. He started looking around for that creature. The young man was sure that in one of the sides he saw the silhouette of a man, because also judging by the carcasses of wolves, there really was someone there. He suggested that it could be another one locked in the game. The young man lifted one of the carcasses of wolves, examining it. He assumed that it was as if all the blood had been sucked out of the wolf. Something was moving behind him, but Gil didn't notice it. He reasoned that whether the player could resort to such an atrocity. But then the young man was struck by the realization that he was mistaken. And at that moment, a red notification from the system appeared in front of his eyes, stating about the danger. From behind, something black moved towards the young man. Gil managed to dodge, cutting something with his sword at the same time. Looking at the ground, he saw some kind of severed appendage that was twitching. The system notified him that the weapon's durability had decreased by 25%. Gil realized that it wasn't a man who had killed the wolves. In confirmation of his words, a creature with a human body began to come into the light, and the head was like an insect. His skin had a bluish color. It was a monster of a higher class. The monster's arm, which, it turns out, was cut by Gil, began to grow back. The young man himself understood at that moment that this monster and the desert wolves were radically different opponents. At this thought, the young man's hands with the sword began to shake. Besides, if his stats hadn't increased after raising the level, he would already be dead. His side was scratched by the monster's attack. The monster's arm has completely grown back. The young man was shocked. The system informed Gil that the name of this creature is the Wandering Actor. His level was unknown. The actor who lives in the Rarknea desert has perfect speed. In the desert, it is the tip of the food chain. He feeds on the blood of living beings. A person cannot hide if the actor is out hunting. Gil was ready to meet a variety of monsters, but the chilling power of the Decider seemed to pin him to the ground, taking control of his body. A young man feels such horror for the first time, from the realization that he was hunted. Meanwhile, the Decider rushed to the attack, rapidly approaching Gil. He almost touched the young man with his hand, but he was able to dodge. After that he rushed to attack the monster, bringing his sword behind his head in a jump, because he would not succumb to intimidation. Already under the very sword, the Decider managed to dodge. The young man's sword hit the ground, and the young man himself did not understand what had happened. Meanwhile, the Decider found himself behind Gil and aimed his fist at his face. There was a blow. The young man flew to the side because of him, rolled several times on the ground, then stuck his sword, breaking himself with it. When he stopped, he looked at the monster with the thought that now he understood about the words of the system about the speed of the monster. Gil straightened up, and the monster, looking at him, slightly tilted his head and said something in his own language. After that, he attacked the burden again, in an instant being in front of him and hitting him in the stomach. The young man spat blood from his mouth, kneeling down. He realized that the last blow could well have taken his life. Except, Gil didn't understand what the monster was up to. The decider pushed the young man away. After that, he tried to get up. The monster came up to him, squatting down. He held Gil's sword in his hand, while holding it out to the young man. Gil didn't understand why he was doing this. The monster pointed with the edge of his hand at his neck. Gil realized that the decider was offering to try to kill him. The young man realized that he had seen this before. Namely, as a cat, having caught a mouse, does not hurry to eat it for a while. The decider wanted to play with his prey. Gil lay on the sand, trying to catch his breath. The strength of his weapon was 80%. The decider was too fast for him, so he couldn't be hit by ordinary attacks. The monster first grabbed Gil by the collar of his shirt, and then began to hold him by the neck above the ground. The decider turned to the young man, calling him a man. Gil was surprised that the monster could talk. Meanwhile, the decider continued, saying that Gil is weak as a maggot. The young man immediately after these words cut off his arm with his sword, after which he abruptly jumped away from the monster. He called the actor vile, like an insect, and also said about his empty head. The monster's arm grew back, and he laughed. The young man seemed curious to him, which he voiced. The last time he came across interesting people was 100 years ago. Gil replied that he was also interested in him. The young man had not felt his blood boil for a long time. He thought that his family, friends, and past life were very far from him. Gil has no right to die in this world. At these thoughts, a golden aura enveloped the young man. After that, a pillar of light struck from the sky. The decider shielded himself from the bright radiance with his hand. Gil was standing in this pillar of light. When the pillar of light completely disappeared, the young man was surrounded by blue lightning. The system informed Gil that his will to fight had activated the special blessing of the goddess Latona. So he got 100+ to all attributes, namely strength, speed, damage, endurance. In addition to the lightning, the young man was surrounded by a blue aura. The decider said that now Gil looks like someone who has power. But then the monster was surprised that the young man abruptly disappeared from where he was standing and appeared immediately in front of him, while attacking him. Gil kept attacking him with his sword over and over again. But then suddenly his sword broke, and the system informed him that the strength of the weapon is 0%. So there was a breakdown and further use of the sword is impossible. But even so, the young man continued his offensive, simply throwing away the sword and striking the arbiter in the face with his fist. With this attack of Gil, the monster was thrown far back. At the same time, a large cloud of dust rose. Gil decisively told the monster that he would change his idea of people. But to his surprise, when the dust settled, the decider was not in the place where he flew away. But then the young man felt the monster behind him. The actor transformed, became completely white, and some appendages appeared from his back and head. He attacked Gil. After the young man sank to one knee, he called him ignorant and again dubbed him weak as a maggot. Gil, bleeding, said with an ironic grin that the monster could not even be defeated like that. The actor himself at that moment had already risen into the air, and was hovering over the young man. He started calling for some kind of attack. Blue lightning bolts began to form in his hand, and then a creature appeared above it, looking like a skeleton in a robe with a scythe at the ready. The decider mentally said goodbye to Gil, pointing his hand at him. The young man looked at the decider, and at that moment he was struck by an attack. Gil just thought that this was how his life would leave him. System notifications appeared stating that player Chen Jil's health points were 0. The player died. Gil abruptly opened his eyes and sat up. He was on a bed in some kind of wooden house. The young man was breathing heavily, putting his hand on his chest near his heart. He wondered that he was alive. Gil assumed that he managed to leave the game while looking out of the window at the head of the bed, so he made sure that he was still in the game. After all, the young man was in some kind of house, which was located in the forest near the mountains. Gil didn't understand where he was and wondered about it. He decided to open a system window with his own characteristics. The young man was thinking about the fact that he was still in the game, but the monster had definitely killed him. And as a result, Gil woke up unharmed. Lifting his t-shirt, the young man made sure that there were not even wounds left on his body. The question of what had happened immediately popped into his head. But then someone came into the room. It turned out to be a red-haired, curvaceous girl who brought some things lying in a wooden basin. Noticing that Gil had woken up, she hesitantly noted this, saying out loud. They looked at each other for a while with incomprehension, because the young man was still sitting, with one hand lifting the edge of his shirt, exposing his torso. Gil abruptly lowered his t-shirt, waved his hand to the girl in greeting, and replied that he had just come to his senses. But the red-haired woman abruptly turned around, closing her eyes, and shouted to some grandfather that the young man had woken up. Gilvey did not understand what was going on, and assumed that he had entered the village of newcomers. A man covered with scars was standing in the water and collecting grass that was in it. He was completely gray-haired and had a toned figure. Who is this man? Exclaimed about what the girl said. Now, they were all together in the room where Gil woke up. The girl asked him again that he had been killed. She was sitting next to the young man on the bed, and was sitting on a chair in front of them. Gil, looking at his hand, agreed with her, and also added that his entire chest was striated. After that, the young man asked them about how exactly he ended up in this place. The red-haired woman answered him, explaining that Grandpa found him when he went hunting. The man himself was lighting his pipe at that moment. The man continued, saying that Gil was barely breathing, but was alive. In addition, he added that there is no game and the village of beginners that he is talking about is not in this place, and they are not NPCs or players. The young man frowned and thought in amazement that this could not be, because he was still in the world of the game. There must be some mistake in this situation. But then, Gil was struck by an idea. He opened the system window with his characteristics and pointed at it with his hand, while asking the girl and the man to look at him. They looked in the direction the young man was pointing. Gil began to explain to them that this is the taskbar of the game, while pressing something. Then he pointed to the system status display line, and then to his status bar while explaining his actions. He added that there is still a map in the game. At that moment, the girl and the man began to talk about the fact that the monster had knocked the young man's head off, because they saw nothing except Gil, who was fussing. Gil himself was tense at that moment because there was still no connection and Xiaomi's ID was also not being searched. He is completely disconnected from the outside world. The young man wondered how he could get out of the world of the game. He shouted in despair that he wanted to go home. But then Gil heard the answer that no one had ever managed to leave that place before. Said that. He also added that not a single inhabitant of the Rarknea desert was able to leave its territory. His face was serious at this moment. Gil immediately asked about the reason for this, because maybe the desert is big, but there must be a way out of it. He also asked the man about what his words about the impossibility of leaving the desert mean, as well as how the man and the girl themselves ended up in this place. The red-haired woman began the story that a few years ago, she and killed a dragon on the mainland of Bergamaffa. At the same moment, lightning struck. Sadly, she said that after that, they woke up in this house. She also added that informed her about the place of their stay, the legendary Rarknea Desert, a place of detention where even gods can be. Only the one who finds the Kybri temple will be able to get out to freedom. Legend has it that the Rarknea desert has no end. With tears in her eyes, the red-haired woman spoke about the fact that countless people went in search of the temple, but none returned. She also said that gradually everyone began to abandon the idea of finding a temple, and preferred to live in the place where they are, rather than die. Putting his hand on Gil's shoulder, informed him that every year they have new people, but no one has left this place yet. Leaving the room, the man added that gradually, those people came to terms with reality, and that Sally would show him the city later. Gil was angry and thought about the fact that he was still in the game, while remembering the description in the manga of similar plots. Suddenly, a notification from the system appeared in front of him, with the arrival of a new task. The task notification glowed with a golden glow. It was called Payback for the Early Death of Kybri. The task could not be refused, it could only be accepted. The task was that for rebirth under the protection of the god Kybri, Gil needed to help the god break the seal. The conditions of fulfillment were the search for the Kybri temple in the Rarknea desert, the destruction of the Nabris monster sealed in the temple, and the liberation of Kybri. The young man was angry. The reward for the task was the key that would lead him out of the Rarknea desert. The sun was shining, and the wind was stirring the grass and other vegetation. Gil was lying in a clearing and looking at something in the system window. He still couldn't figure out the reason for his appearance in this place, but at least he had a purpose. He needs to get to the Kybri temple and kill Nabris to help free her, and when the time comes, find a way to get out of the game. But then someone called his name. It turned out to be a red-haired girl. Approaching the young man, she asked him about the reason for leaving the field. She spent half a day looking for him. Her hair and snow-white dress were fluttering in the wind at this moment. Gil got up from the ground and apologized to the girl, also saying that he had no business, so he went out for a walk. The young man walked to the edge of the mountain and pointed his hand towards the Rarknea desert, specifying at the same time that it was her. Approaching him, the girl replied that it was possible and, so to speak, after all, the place where they are is surrounded by desert on all sides. At the same time, she pointed to the young man with her hand in different directions, confirming her words. Gil expressed his thoughts on the fact that he did not know how long the search for the temple could take, which surprised the girl. The young man must get out, and for this he needs a temple. The red-haired woman began to convince Gil that there was no temple. If he leaves, he will die. But the young man has already gone. At the same time, he told her that he had already died once, so it does not matter to him what he will have to overcome to find him. Gil called the girl, Sally, to walk together to the city. When they had almost reached him, the red-haired girl asked the young man if he really wanted to find a temple, to which she received confident consent from him. Sally told him that there are many different monsters in the desert. Even Ub does not dare to hunt them. But Gil only answered her words so that she wouldn't worry, because he has amazing abilities. But then their conversation was interrupted. Someone attacked them. After the attack, a cloud of dust rose in the place where Jill and Sally were standing. 3 guys appeared and attacked them. One of them said that the game was hooked. Gil, still in a cloud of dust, tried to clear his throat. He saw Sally crouching down in front of him, surrounded by fire. One of the guys noticed that the girl shielded herself from his blow with a fiery dungeon, and also, he added about their long-awaited meeting. Sally called him by the name of Boban and asked if it was him again. When Sally straightened up, Gil asked her about the reason for the guy's attack on them. The girl told him that she forgot to tell about them, because the scarier monsters in the city are hunters bandits who do not want to hunt in the desert. They rob other people, making a living by killing ordinary people. At these words of hers, the one of the bandits who attacked them and then talked to the girl surrounded himself with purple lightning. While grinning angrily, he summoned black swords covered with purple lightning. Gil was trying to figure out what kind of ability the bandit had. The same one at that moment told the girl that last time she managed to escape to the desert, but at the moment she will not get off so easily. Sally herself was standing at that moment, summoning fire on her hands. Her hair rose up, and her dress fluttered as if in the wind. She told the young man to return home urgently and find Ub. And also, the girl informed him that she would figure it out herself. Ub was on the street near the house and watched the weather. He realized, looking at the sky covered with clouds and sparkling lightning, that there would be a thunderstorm. The wind ruffled his hair. Almost at the entrance to the house, he thought that by the time Sally should have already returned home. One of the bandits asked Sally what she thought that he would let Gil go for Ub. He reminded the girl with a grin that she herself knows about the lack of damage to him from her spells. The bandit told her to follow him, and then, perhaps, he would let the young man go. The girl responded to his words with a denial. While stepping forward Gila, the bandit told her not to blame him for being brusque. Sally told the young man to leave soon, and she would figure out how to detain the bandits herself. Gil disagreed with her, which surprised the girl. He explained to her that the word escape was unknown to him. Even if they are only familiar with nothing, Gil will not leave his friend to save himself. His gaze was full of determination. But then that bandit flew up to the young man, while holding his face in his hand, and slamming his head into a tree. The bandit told Gil who he thought he was, calling him a jerk. He also asked the young man what he expects about the coming true of his lies. The bandit also said that it's not words that decide them, but power. But then, Gil grabbed him by the arm, pushing him away from his head. At the same time, the young man asked him that he considered himself strong. In addition, Gil, continuing to hold him, asked him what he considered a sneak attack to be an indicator of his skills. After that, the young man tried to quickly hit the bandit in the face, while continuing to hold his hand. The bandit dodged and then jumped away from Gil. The young man had enough strength to dislocate his right arm, which is what the bandit thought. Gil himself at that moment mentally admitted that he was a bandit of a hustler. Even though he added all the points to dexterity, he still didn't react to the guy's attack. Sally asked Gil if he was okay, to which she received a positive response. After that, the girl asked Boban about what he needed from her. The guy angrily reminded Sally that this was not the first time he had asked, and said that he wanted her to become his girlfriend. The red-haired woman replied with a categorical refusal and asked to be left alone. Gil clarified with Sally that Boban was running after her as much as he could to convince her to date him. The girl shyly agreed in response, but then the bandit exclaimed that the young man and the girl were together, and also that she rejected him because of Gil. Sally replied to him that he was talking nonsense, and they were just friends with the young man. Boban didn't believe her, so he asked about friendship and excuses. He summoned the swords again and invited Gil to fight like men without hiding. The bandit made a condition that if Gil won, he would leave Sally alone. After Boban's words, the system gave the young man a side task, Shadow of Rage, in which the victory over the shadow thug Boban was a condition. The reward was the lost Latona card. Gil was surprised by the appearance of the task, especially since the reward was a card with which it would be possible to get out of the game. He agreed to the task, and then gave his answer to Boban. Boban's assistants did not understand why he became very serious. Perhaps it was because of jealousy. Sally asked Gil about his confidence, because he couldn't beat Boban, the strongest shadow swordsman in the city. The young man grinned and asked again about the shadow. The girl explained to him that the shadow swordsman is not only able to use the power of the dark shadow, but also has great speed. The strength of his attack is also not lagging behind. The shadow envelops the blades, giving them destructive power. Gil was already walking towards Boban. Sally told him after him that he could die, to which she received the answer that he didn't care, because he had already died once. Gil is eager to get out of the game world, not die. At that moment, both rushed to attack. Gil attacked Boban with his fist, while he could not understand why everything turned out this way. He only needs to defeat the bandit, then everything will be fine, and he will get a card to get out of the game. Boban dodged the young man's punches and kicks while laughing at him. The guy was crawling around the place of their battle like a shadow. The bandit even asked Sally that it was all the abilities of someone she liked. It seemed strange to Gil that Boban only defended himself, but did not attack. He was trying to figure out what he was up to. The girl ran up to the young man and said that she would go with those, and he would need to find Ub, then they would rescue her. Only Ub can handle Boban in the whole city. But the young man still told Sally that he would not leave, which surprised her. Gil told her not to worry. After all, he couldn't give up the fight. After all, if he wins, they will be able to get out of the city together. The red-haired woman did not understand what he was talking about, so she asked him about how the victory was connected with this. The young man thought about what was happening had ceased to be logical since he got to the city. He's stuck in the game with no way out. He died and miraculously resurrected. And now the system has notified that it will give him a card for defeating Boban. Gil knew that this might all seem like a coincidence, but it seems that someone is behind it after all. But the flow of his thoughts was interrupted by Boban himself, who dropped his blades while sticking them into the ground. He asked the young man with a grin why he stood up, and also that he was scared, but it was too late to change his mind. Gil reflected his smile, repeating it, and replied with disagreement, and also asked if Boban himself was afraid, because he jumps from him like a grasshopper. The bandit responded by saying that he had come to the realization about boredom in the battle with the trash, who does not even have a weapon. After that, Boban took one of his blades in his hand and said that since an official fight was taking place between them, then everything should be fair. Then he threw that blade at Gil. The young man calmly picked it up with one of his hands. Also, the bandit added that he did not want Sally and his subordinates to think about his deception of Gil. His subordinates realized that their boss had become serious. The girl didn't say anything to that. Gil asked Boban with a smile that he turns out to be a decent guy, otherwise he still remembers his recent sneak attack. Boban replied that he was emotional. But the young man did not listen to him, only telling him to stop talking to him. He also added that if he told the truth, then let them have a fair fight. Gil decided for himself that he would defeat the bandit at all costs, and get the card, and Boban wanted to demonstrate the power of the shadow to the young man. Then the young man went on the attack, but Boban only grinned at this, and then sharply attacked him. The young man was standing with his blade crossed with Boban, but then Sally called out to him, informing him that there was an attack behind him. After her shout, Gil turned around and saw that one Boban started attacking him from behind. But the young man was able to stop the bandit's attack. But then he was surprised, because a shadow began to spread from the blade that was stopped by Gil, and Boban was above him. Sally was scared and called the young man by name. The bandit cut Gil's shoulder. At this moment, the young man was thinking that he had taken away 300 health points, which means that he still had 700 left. When he has less than 300 left, then Gil will be automatically recognized as defeated. Boban, whose blade was dripping with the young man's blood, told him to give up, because he would not be able to defeat him. The system offered Gil a cure. He couldn't give up, so he agreed to her suggestion. After that, a green glow enveloped Gil. It was a first-level treatment that restored 100 health points to the young man, while stopping the bleeding. Boban and his subordinates laughed at the fact that Gil was a support. They were even more amused by the fact that support was fighting with a shadow swordsman. After that, Boban turned away from the young man and said that he should leave Sally and leave. The awakened support is not worthy to fight with him. Gil told the bandit that he was afraid of losing in Sally's presence. This angered Boban and he asked him about what he had said. Gil, on the other hand, got into a fighting stance while telling Tom to stop talking and fight. Boban began to summon even more shadows that were coming out of him. He told the youth that he would show him the true power of the Shadow Swordsman. After these words, his shadow doppelgangers appeared next to him. Gil was not pleased with Boban's actions, namely, that he split in three. The bandit explained to him that Shadow Swordsmen rely on the ability to clone in battle. The young man began to think about the fact that from the very beginning he was attacked by a clone, and the attack from the back was carried out by Boban himself. He suggested that perhaps the clone and the original could swap places. Gil said about a very difficult class. Angrily, Boban said that he was tired of showing compassion to a worthless support. Also, he added that since the young man was interested in his true strength, he could look at the Shadow Swordsman in action before his death. Gil got into a fighting stance and answered him, saying that he was looking forward to it. He was the first to attack. Boban at that moment thought about his arrogance, and then sent shadows to the young man. One of the shadows rushed swiftly towards Gil, but he met her, crossing his blade with hers. When they separated the blades, the shadow attacked the youth again, but he dodged and then attacked himself. Boban's shadow attacked Gil again, but he was able to defend himself. But while he was holding back the onslaught of the doppelganger, he thought that he was strong. Even it was difficult to resist the clone's attack, and there were two of them, looking in the direction of Boban, where he was standing with his double, but did not see the second one. At this moment, a shadow appeared behind the young man. One of the shadows told him that he managed to dodge the attack that time, but this time it won't happen. The young man just stood there. Gil amazed everyone with how he was able to attack the shadow. The attacked doppelganger could not understand how it happened, how he was able to dodge. Boban asked about what happened in general. The young man himself was trying to catch his breath at that moment and thought that he had almost lost his life. System notifications appeared congratulating you on receiving a dexterity bonus for acquiring the skill Lightning Strike of the first level. The hidden skill was that, being in mortal danger, therefore, Gil received a skill corresponding to the attribute of dexterity. A lightning strike makes a young man not susceptible to physical damage for 2 seconds. After that, he can deliver a critical strike of 150% of his strength. The cooldown time of the skill is 5 seconds. Gil understood that if he hadn't had this skill, he would have already died. He grinned and said that he had to deal with the doppelganger. Boban laughed and recalled that defeated Shadow. Continuing to laugh, the bandit said that he was interested in it because, in his opinion, Gil was lucky because he was able to avoid the attack again. But at the same time, he was only able to attack the doppelganger. Boban informed the young man that their fight would now begin for real. He called his blade, calling it Banks, which was in Gil's hands, which surprised him. The bandit said that sympathizing with the enemy is the same as restraining yourself. He admitted he underestimated Gil. 2 of his shadows were already standing in front of him. With a serious face, Boban informed him that now the games were over, now let him look without blinking. The wind picked up, the fighters stood ready to attack. Boban began to perform his final technique. He and his clones stuck their blades into the ground. Shadow scars flew from them to Gil, and the young man himself was surrounded by a shadow curtain. But suddenly, he saw an attack near his eye and was able to dodge it. Attacks flew at him from all sides, and he continued to evade them in every possible way. But one attack still managed to injure Gil, scratching his arm. The young man continued to dodge, and the system informed him that he had lost 30% of his health, so Gil needed to heal his wounds in a timely manner. Gil understood that without a weapon he could not repel the blow, so he could only dodge. But suddenly a grinning Boban appeared in front of him, which surprised the young man. Then, he told Gil about the death that had crept up on him unnoticed. After that, Gil was hit by a hail of attacks from all sides. Boban jumped away from Gil, who was encased in a shadow cocoon, standing with his back to the young man. The bandit said that he would find a great place for him in the cemetery. But then, something struck him and others. Ub appeared behind Boban, who stopped Gil's attack with his hand. After that, holding his hand, the man told the young man to stop. Gil stood in front of Ub and Boban, all bruised and partially torn clothes, but his eyes burned with determination. A man was stopping him. At that moment, Sally ran up to them and asked about the health of the young man. Rubbing his wrist, Gil replied that everything was fine. Ub called them to leave because the storm was about to begin. When they started to leave together, Boban laughed behind their backs. Laughing, he asked Ub with a serious face what he thought. Since he came, he could just take them away like that. The man stopped and, without turning around, told Boban that if he intended to stop him, then at the same moment, his days would be numbered. The bandit was tense while remembering Gil's last attack. Boban did not believe in Ub's words, because the newly minted support will not be able to kill him. Therefore, with rage in his voice, he shouted to the man that if he had not intervened, then Gil would have died already. The system notified Gil that the Shadow of Fury task had been completed. The condition was a victory over the thug Bobin. The young men received one card, 15,000 points and a secret key. Gil, looking at the notification, could not understand why the system counted him a victory. But then he was interrupted by Ub, who threw his straw hat on Sally's head and said that a thunderstorm would start soon, so they were leaving. Bobin's subordinates, walking to him, told their boss that it was also time to leave, because if they got into a thunderstorm, they could die. But he didn't listen to them and shouted to Gil to come back because they hadn't finished. His subordinates were already holding him, but Bobin continued to shout after the young man. Gil stopped, looking at the bandit, but he was called by Sally, who asked about the reason for his stop and reminded the young man that the storm was already closed. After that, Gil turned around and told her he was coming. Already in the house, Sally was treating Gil's wounds. She told him to stop twitching and that she would soon finish treating his wounds. The young man was lying on the bed all bandaged up. The girl smeared his leg with ointment and told him that she could not anoint him because he was twitching. Gil apologized, and also said that he had caused trouble for the girl and Ub again. Sally only replied that it had already happened. She didn't expect that the young man would be so strong. Gil was thinking that even though he had gained experience, his level had not risen. He also needs to heal his wounds. The young man realized that he needed to understand the mechanics of raising the level. He decided to ask the girl about the fact that he and Ub had known Bobin before. Sally agreed, and also explained that they had been with him since childhood. They were like brother and sister. The girl informed Gil about the end of the dressing. The young man thanked her with a smile. Sally told him that she should thank him. After that, the girl went outside, covering herself with an umbrella, and said that she still needed to help Ub and let the young man rest. Gil agreed. Gil, sitting on the bed, turned to the window. He remembered that it was also raining on the day he got into the game. He was wondering how his mom was, how much she was worried about the fact that she couldn't find him in any way. Gil opened some kind of system window, with words about the importance of his return. He remembered that for the victory over Bobin he was given a Raknea card. According to it, the young man only needs to find the temple, defeat the boss, and then it will be possible to get out. He decided to leave as soon as the rain stopped. The system reminded Gil that he had received a secret key, while asking him to confirm his receipt. The young man did not understand why this key was needed. Gil got it, the golden key, and activated it through the system. She informed the young man that one of the treasure chests could fall to him for the fight: white, green, purple, red, orange, and black. The key must be used to search the chest. It may contain gems or equipment that cannot be bought in the city. Gil realized that a chest might fall out after a fight. He found it amusing. After that, the young man got out of bed, took the cape and put it on himself. He decided to move forward immediately. At that moment Ub came. Gil noticed it. The man himself apologized to him for not coming to see him earlier. Ub barely managed to cover the harvest, because it was raining very hard, which he told the young man about. The young man was back on the bed. Gil replied to the man that there was nothing wrong with that, and also asked him if Ub wanted something from him. The man asked how things were going with the wounds. The young man told him not to worry, because the wounds are not deep and will heal in a couple of days. The man was happy for him, after which he made a serious expression on his face. He did not expect that Gil would be able to defeat Bobin, who was the strongest swordsman of their village. Rubbing his hands, the young man replied that if the bandit had taken their fight seriously from the very beginning, then Gil would not have won. The man was aware of Bobin's abilities, but in battle it is not only strength that decides, which he told the young man. Will is also an important factor. Gil's victory was not accidental. The young man asked Ub about the reason for the changes of Bobin, who had been with Sally since childhood. To this he received the answer that it was a long story. 10 years ago, there was the same downpour as on this day. That day Ub and Sally moved out into the Raknea desert. Passing by the house where they planned to stay overnight, they noticed how a strange monster attacked a family living there. The monster was holding a girl in one hand at that moment. He was 2 to 3 times the size of an ordinary person. Ub said that it was too late to help then, because this monster had already killed all the people in that house. But fortunately, a child survived in this family. He tried to call his mother, whom he held in his arms, while bursting into tears. But then the monster saw the boy, and then rushed at him, almost grabbing the child. The monster was thrown back by Ub's force. The monster first got to his feet, holding his shoulder, and then, glancing at the man, disappeared by jumping into the forest. The child was still sitting by his mother's body and crying. That boy was Bobin. After the funeral of the boy's parents, Ub sheltered him. The man told Gil about these events. The young man asked the man that since everything was like that, what he needed from him. Answered him by saying that Boban chose the destruction of that monster as his goal, and the man persuaded him to give up the idea. Continued by saying that various strong monsters live in Rarknea, which are even difficult to imagine. The monster who killed Boban's parents, even a man doubts that he can kill, and he would even more so could not. That's why Boban left them. Gil wondered what kind of monster was that day, which even considers strong. The man interrupted the young man's thoughts, saying that it was time for Gil to rest. Gil thought that even with the map in his hands, he still had to get to the temple. The young man told that he did not know how strong the monsters were in the desert, but the one who fought with him was able to kill him. He realized that with his current strength, he would die before he found the temple. During the previous battle, Gil's attributes increased, but he was easily defeated so far. The young man did not like it, so he decided for himself that he needed to do training. After that, he turned to Ubba, stopping him, then asked him to teach him how to fight, because Gil wants to become stronger, find a temple and get out of this world. The man first froze when he heard his words, and then only told him to rest. After leaving the house, Gil began to convince him of the seriousness of his intentions and the knowledge of a way to get out of there. But gradually moving away from the house, remained silent. The young man hit the doorway with his fist and said that he was crazy because the man broke up with Boban for the same reason, and he just blurted out what was on his mind. But told the young man to come to the mountainside the next day when the rain stopped. Also, the man put forward a condition to Gil that if he passes his test, then will agree to his training. To this, Gil happily shouted to him not to worry, because he would definitely pass. Leaving, the man remembered how he restrained Gil's blow, and thought that he did not know the reason why the hope that it was possible to get out of that place flared up again. In that battle with Boban, Gil literally erupted with terrifying power. Even his thunder shield cracked in an attempt to stop the youth. Assumed that the young man would lead their sortie from this place. When Gil turned around and started to enter the house, but then he received a notification about the task from the system. He decided to get acquainted with the notification that came. A list of daily tasks appeared to his attention, namely, jogging for a distance of 10 kilometers with a load, 3,000 push-ups with a load, 2,000 body lifts from a prone position. To Gil, the training seemed hellish, but the attributes will come in very handy. Therefore, it is impossible to refuse. After these reflections, he pressed the accept button. The sun was shining brightly. Here, Gil, breathing heavily, was walking with a big log on his shoulders. At that moment, he was thinking that the system was taking care of him, helping with the preparation. Then he did push-ups, and then pumped the press. Mentally, the young man noted that he ran 10 kilometers, did 1,316 of 3,000 push-ups with a load, as well as 984 of 2,000 body lifts. It's been a long time since Gil started fighting to achieve the goal. This test is much more exciting than the difficult path that he will have to go through. The system notified the young man about completing the task, receiving 4 attribute points as a reward. At that moment, Gil himself collapsed on the grass. He began to think about which attribute would be better supplemented. Considering his abilities to heal and protect, he decided to add 2 points to intelligence, the rest to endurance. But someone interrupted him by calling his name. It was Sally, who was running to Gil. When the girl approached the young man, he asked her what happened. She started to take something out of the bag that was hanging on her shoulder, while saying that she brought him breakfast, but did not find him in the room. Told her where Gil could be found. Sally asked Gil about the reason for his walking around in his pants, suggesting that it was because of training. While she was asking these questions, the girl gave the young man a bundle and a blue cloth with food in his hands. He, in turn, thanked her. Gil told the red-haired girl that had agreed to teach him how to fight, so he came early to warm up and practice. Sally was surprised by this, and she asked the young man again. Gil agreed, while rejoicing at the loaf he brought. The girl was delighted, because she really wants to see what abilities Gil will awaken. But the young man clarified with her that unless other skills are available to him, since he is a support, while he was already eating a bun with might and main. Sally confidently agreed, because the support class was given to him by the deity. Gil's own element will be determined based on his predisposition. For example, the girl element is fire, has thunder, and Boban has shadow. All people have their own. The class only gives a person a direction of development, and the element is determined by itself. Gil's gaze became serious after her explanation. Now he was wondering what he could awaken. The world in which Gil lived consisted of 5 continents. Bolar's continent is one of the gathering places for people. The business card of this continent is the rapid trade and commodity exchange. Residents of various regions flock to this continent. If Bolars is the center, then to the west, on the continent of Mokala, there are many volcanoes, the birthplace of the dragon rider. To the north are the lands of the Xanthai continent, forever covered with ice. This continent is home to giants and ferocious beasts, as well as those places abound in minerals. To the east is the continent of Bergama, covered with forests. Elves with strong magic and huge beasts live on this continent. The south is the home of dwarves engaged in forging. Their homeland is called Shariktik, the so-called edge of the earth. Sally told Gil that it was only necessary to cross the Great Sea to reach the realm of the gods and gain endless power. And that's what the rumors say. She used to think of it as fairy tales. But as soon as the girl found herself in this place, she realized that it was true. Gil leaned over to Sally, who was sitting on the grass, and said that it was true, and also, the possibility of finding a temple to leave the desert was also not a legend. He addressed the girl by name and promised her that they would definitely get out of the desert. Sally agreed with him, but then they were interrupted by Ub, who did not expect that they would come before him. The girl abruptly got up from the ground and then approached the man. He told her to explain herself. Sally, taking his hand, asked him what he was talking about. Ub looked at the young man seriously and asked if he had warmed up before the fight. Gil emphatically agreed with him. After a while, Ub explained the information to Gil, namely, that the deity of primordial chaos once endowed this world with various races, vocations, and classes. The only thing they have in common are the elements. They are represented not only by those that can be seen and touched. For example, water, fire, thunder, earth, wood, and those that are hidden from view, light, and shadow. To master the power of the elements, you need to activate your perception. On these words, Ub concentrated lightning between his palms, then letters appeared in circles around him. In order to feel their flow, you need to feel the presence first. At the same time, the man sat down to the ground, put one hand on it, under which blue lightning sparkled and a magic circle of the same color shone. Then, Ub was enveloped by a large amount of lightning. This startled the young man who was watching him closely. Ub straightened up and told Gil that the teleporter that was at the man's feet would take the young man beyond the desert to the settlement of animals. Ub discovered it by accident while hunting. After these words, the man took hold of the sword wrapped in bandages with one hand, which was behind his back. At the same time, he said that this sword had been with him in all battles for 10 years. Handing the sword to Gil, Ub informed him that he would reopen the portal in 3 days. If the young man can kill the king of beasts with this sword and bring him his head, the test will be passed. The man also told him not to forget that only by awakening the power of the elements, he would discover the true power of the sword, with which he could kill the beast. Ub warned him that there was a chance that Gil might not come back, so he needed to think carefully so that he wouldn't regret it later. Gil smiled and, grabbing his sword, resolutely said that he would not regret his decision. Turning around and walking to the portal, the young man also added that he would return back with the head of the beast. When Gil got on the portal that Ub called, a notification appeared from the system about receiving the task King of Beasts. She also asked the young man to confirm his acceptance. Gil agreed, and his look at that moment was serious. The system opened a window in which it was written that the task was accepted. Below was written the countdown, which was supposed to start with the figure at 72 hours. After that, Gil was teleported. Ub saw off the blue pillar of light that teleported the young man. The man said out loud that the inhabitants of those places are extremely dangerous. Only by mastering the power of the elements, the young man will be able to defeat their leader. The power comes from the perception of the outside world. Meanwhile, Gil appeared in some place in a pillar of light. Moving away from the portal, the young man went to look around. He noted aloud that the location of the assignment was different from the desert. The ground in this place was black, and there was not a glimmer of light in the sky. Gil also noted that there was a bad smell in this place, although it didn't matter to him. His goal was to find a pack of animals. With these thoughts, he opened a system window with his own characteristics. The young man understood that with his current level, it would be very difficult to defeat the boss. First, he will need to figure out a way to raise the level. Gil decided to start searching, but at that moment something appeared above his head, resembling a rift in the sky in the form of a rhombus of reddish-pink color. Something green was heading towards the young man from behind to attack, but he was able to dodge. Gil noted the speed of this creature, which is so fast that it cannot be seen. Gil saw a black-colored creature that had wings like a bat, a head on which there were some tentacles with green lines, and instead of a face there was a cut from which there was a red-pink glow. The system informed the young man that this monster was called Didamu. He was level 20. This monster was the most mysterious evil spirits of Rarknea. Gil, looking at the monster, thought that even without the power of the elements, the sword is still capable of killing. At the same time, he put his hand on its hilt. The young man grinned, while saying out loud that he was going to see how it would work out for him. After that, Gil and Didamu rushed to the attack. The young man thought that his experience was constantly increasing. He was no longer a beginner. A green glow appeared around Didamu, and then the monster pointed its tentacles at Gil. But the young man didn't care who his opponent was. There is no room for fear in his heart anymore, because the desire to fight has replaced him. He wants to kill the beast, gain experience, level up, and continuously become stronger. At the same time, the young man cut the tentacles of the monster with a sword, and also periodically dodged its attacks. First, Gil jumped away from Didamu, and then with greater speed rushed to the monster. He wasn't even stopped by the tentacles' attacks, as he continued to cut them. At the same time, the young man thought that the feeling of constantly getting better after a victory is a real pleasure. Finally, getting close to the datum, Gil stuck the sword into it, and then cut it. After defeating the monster, the young man received 35,000 experience points. His level was upgraded to the 17th and received 5 attribute points. Looking at the system window, Gil admitted that it was not easy for him. But then a whole horde of Didamu appeared in front of him.